It is 6 o'clock and across the state, counting is about to begin to determine just who will govern Tasmania over the next 4 years. And as those numbers flow through the Electoral Commission, the ABC's election team here in the tally room will bring you the results seat by seat. And after tirelessly covering the campaign, joining me tonight is the ABC's state political reporter, Richard Baines.
Michael, there's certainly plenty to play for. Will Hodgman is gunning to become the first Liberal government in 3 decades to win back-to-back terms, while Rebecca White's Labor team has staked its hopes on a bold plan to throw out pokies from pubs and clubs. Joining us on the panel to make sense of the numbers as they come in is Liberal power broker Senator Erica Betts, Senior Labor MP Julie Collins and former State Greens leader Nick McKim, now Australian Greens Senator. And of course, no election coverage is complete without the ABC's election analyst, Anthony Green.
Well, tonight it's the battle for the 25 seats in the House of Assembly. Who will win government at this election? The government has 15 seats. They can afford to lose 2 and still be in majority government. If they lose a third, we're back into the territory of minority government. So there's a lot to play for tonight, and we'll be waiting for those first numbers to start rolling in.
I'm Michael Rowland. Stay with us. You're watching Tasmania Votes. It is going to be a very big night as we find out just who does govern Tasmania over the course of the next 4 years. But sadly, the night begins with a sombre tone on the death of 48-year-old former Attorney General Vanessa Goodwin. Richard, a much-loved political figure across the spectrum in the state.
Absolutely tragic news. The death of Vanessa Goodwin this afternoon after a battle with brain cancer. And Senator Betts, obviously a huge loss.
Look, it's a very sad loss. Not only to the Liberal Party, but especially to her family, but the wider Tasmanian community. Vanessa was a wonderful worker within the community, was a great grassroots politician, but also had a great intellect, which made her such a good Attorney General and very focused on law reform. So Vanessa will be sadly missed, has left a wonderful legacy, and yes, it does put a bit of a downer on her tonight, because Vanessa was in particular very good friends with the Premier, and as it happened, I just bumped into the Premier at St John's Hospital, where Vanessa passed away earlier this evening, and it was very clear that the Premier was very saddened by the loss.
Yes, and Will Hodgman has tweeted that he was able to see her this morning to say goodbye and thanked her for everything. And Julie Collins, Vanessa was so well respected all across the political landscape.
Absolutely, Richard. I think she'll be sadly missed by the community. She was out and about in the community all the time. As Erica said, she was a great grassroots local campaigner. She's very well respected in the part of the electorate that we share, and she was always at every function and event that I turned up to, and I think she'll be greatly missed.
And Nick McKim, Cassie O'Connor was devastated when she found out that Vanessa was sick. It is such an enormous loss.
Yeah, Richard, it's very saddening news, and it does cast a bit of a pall no matter what the result of the election tonight, Vanessa's death today. And she was one of those unique politicians who did enjoy respect from everyone in Tasmanian politics right across the spectrum, no matter where you come from. And on behalf of the Greens, I can only offer our condolences and our best wishes to Vanessa's family and to her friends and the loved ones, and particularly people in the Liberal Party who are so close to her.
So we're expecting results, figures to start coming in the next half an hour. Anthony Green, how will you be assessing those numbers as they come in?
Well, I think we have to do a bit of explainer for a start, because this is the first Tasmanian election that's gone out to the rest of the country on News 24, so we have to explain a little bit about the Hare-Clark system. I'll go into a bit more detail when we've actually got votes, because it is sometimes complex, but this is the 25-member chamber of the House of Assembly in Tasmania, the lower house of Parliament that determines government. And the current numbers are the Liberal Party have 15 seats, which in Tasmanian terms is a landslide. You know, you can't get many more than 15 seats to 10 on the other side. The Labor Party has 7, a very poor result last time, and the Greens were down to 3 seats. So that's the starting point for tonight. And to explain how the Tasmanian electoral system works, you'll be familiar with these electorate names from federal elections: Bass, Braddon, Lyons, Franklin and Denison. There are 5 electorates in the House of Representatives, and Tasmania elects 5 members for each of those seats to form the House of Assembly. It's called the Hare-Clark electoral system. It's a bit like the Senate, except you must vote for candidates, you can't vote for parties. So the contest is not only between parties, it's also between candidates of different parties. And the really peculiar thing is it's between candidates of the same party as well. And sometimes you get candidates from one party defeated. So I'll run through the 5 seats and the sitting members and explain where the battle will be. First off, Bass, which everybody knows as the great marginal seat at federal level. And there's only been 1 sitting member in the last 2 decades re-elected in that seat, and 2 of the former members for it are now in State Parliament, which is Michael Ferguson and Michelle O'Byrne. Sarah Courtenay and Peter Gutwin are the other 2 Liberal MPs. Andrea Dawkins was elected by the Tasmanian system called a countback. Kim Booth was the elected Green last time. She was elected, Andrea Dawkins was elected at a recount, so she's got a tough task in trying to capture some of his personal vote from last time. So the battle over that last seat between the Greens and Labor, I suspect, in Bass, will be one that's most interesting to watch. Across the northwest of the state, Braddon is a seat where it looks like the Liberals will almost certainly lose a seat. They had an extraordinary result last time and elected 4 members. The only time since 5-member seats have been in use, there have been 4 members from one party elected. It's highly likely they will lose a seat there, most probably to Labor. So there's 1 seat down, and that gets the government down to 14. Of course, they could actually do really well. Some of the polls have indicated they could hold those seats, but the way the vote broke up last time made it difficult to do that again. Lyons, the great central seat, has 5 members as well, as I said. Guy Barnett, a former senator, Reen Hidding and Mark Shelton have been the members for the last 4 years. David Llewellyn from Labor is retiring, and Rebecca White is now opposition leader. She will now get a huge personal vote. She'll probably top the poll in Lyons. The question is whether she'll bring another Labor member in, or she probably will, but who it will be up to how the candidates have campaigned. The key thing about Lyons is, can the Liberals hold all 3 seats? Because this is probably one of the key seats at the election. And then you move down south. Franklin is a rather peculiar electorate. You can see that it's on both sides of Hobart. It's east of Hobart on the eastern shore. It also includes areas to the south. It's the Premier's electorate, Will Hodgman. Jackie Petrusma has been a member for 2 terms, and Nick Street was elected at a recount following the resignation of Paul Harris. Lara Giddings, a former Premier, is retiring, and Rosalie Woodruff replaced Nick McKim at a recount in the last few years. The Greens are expected to hold their seat. Labor's trying to win a 2nd seat off the Liberals, so it's Nick Street's seat that's probably at risk. Can Will Hodgman keep the personal vote? He got 2 quotas in his own right last time. Can he keep the 3 seats for the Liberal Party? It's critical for them to maintain a 3rd seat here and in Lyons to keep their majority. And the final seat is always the oddity. It's slightly different from the other electorates. It's often been called the greenest electorate in the country. I think we can call Melbourne and a couple of other Melbourne seats as the greenest nowadays. But the Greens are still very strong, and Cassie O'Connor, the leader, represents the seat. There's 2 Labor members, 2 Liberal members, but Matthew Groom is retiring. Now, the problem for the Liberals is if there is a drop in their vote and they lose the 2nd seat. I find it hard to see how a party can get 44% of the vote across the state, which polls have been suggesting, and fall below 32 in Denison. But it's still something worth watching later in the evening. And with Matthew Groom retiring, they have got the Hobart Lord Mayor Sue Hickey as a new candidate. So the Liberals do have 2 strong candidates. But on the Labor ticket, there's a real contest for the 2nd seat as well. And Labor hopes they can get a 3rd. So we'll be coming back to Denison as well. So there's a little bit of action in all these seats, and we'll be coming back and talking about them when we've got some real figures.
You'll earn your money tonight, Anthony Green. That's why we call the election expert here. And there's a good reason why Anthony is full bottle on Tasmanian elections. As you reminded us this week, you have been covering these elections here on the Apple Isle since 1992, and we're showing our viewers, and for the sake of our radio listeners, take us through who's in that lovely photo.
That's me with a thin tie on the left, Judy Tierney with the padded shoulders on the right, and Dr. Dean Jensch from Flinders University in the centre, who did all my analysis.
So you posted that photo on Twitter, and we can bring up now the first response from one of your many fans. And for the benefit of our radio listeners, yes, somebody has described Anthony Green as a stud muffin.
I have nothing to say. I'll stick to the numbers.
You'll take that. Let's pick up on Anthony's analysis there. Just a quick around the grounds predictions. People have voted, so we can all be candid now. Erica Betts, how do you see tonight?
Look, the time for bravado is over. The people have made the determination. We'll find out soon enough. I'm hopeful that Will Hodgman can hang on. with a majority government with 13 seats and who knows with one or two extra. But I think some of the interesting contests will be how some of the celebrity candidates do, such as Sue Hickey, Tim Cox, Michael Kent, Anita Dow. We've got 4 mayors, in fact, running in this election. So, and then between the candidates in the various electorates, I think there'll be very interesting contests.
OK, 13-seat majority. Julie Collins, how's it looking for the Labor Party tonight?
Well, I'm still hopeful we can get majority. Certainly, I think there'll be a north-south divide tonight. I think Labor will be much stronger in the south than in the north. I think that it will be difficult for us to get 13, but I think it's still possible, and I think we can do that in the 3 seats down south.
Over to you, Nick McKim. What's your tip for the evening?
Well, look, I don't think Labor can win majority. The polls are showing pretty clearly that they won't, and in fact they're coming from a long way back considering the seats that they currently hold. Look, overall, I think the Liberals are going to win either 12 or 13 seats, and obviously there's a massive difference between a Liberal result of 12 seats and 13 seats. I agree with Julie. I think we should look for a north-south divide here. I think the pokies issue is playing strongly against the Liberal Party in southern Tasmania. Not convinced that it's playing as strongly against them in northern Tasmania. And I agree with Anthony. I would keep a close eye on Denison. I've got a funny feeling that Labor are going to be right in the hunt for 3 seats in Denison. And if that happens, the Liberals will find it almost impossible to hold majority government.
What about the Greens, though? How many seats do you think the Greens are going to get? Well,
I think we'll hold our 2 southern seats in Denison and Franklin, and we're certainly very hopeful that we can hold our seat in Bass. And with Andrea Dawkins, who's a fantastic candidate, by the way, and it would be a terrible loss to the Parliament if she did lose her seat. In Lyons, there's a local issue that hasn't received a lot of mainstream media attention, which is the expansion of fish farms, right down from the Tasman Peninsula up to the northern part of the east coast. Our candidate Fraser Brindley has been campaigning strongly on the ground on that issue, and worth a close look at the East Coast booths, I reckon. And if those come through for us, we're certainly a live chance to pick up a seat in Lyons.
OK, we'll see who's right as the night goes on. Now, unlike the mainland states, Tasmania uses, as Anthony mentioned, a multi-member electoral system known as Hare-Clark. That's not too different from the way senators are elected in federal parliaments.
Now, to talk us through how this affects the count, Tasmania's Deputy Electoral Commissioner is with ABC reporter Peter Carline. Peter, over to you.
Thanks, Richard. Well, I'm here at the Tasmanian Electoral Commission. The polls have just closed, an exciting moment. The first ballot box of votes has been tipped out and counting is underway. I'm joined by the Deputy Commissioner, as you mentioned, Nairi Edwards. Nairi, thank you for joining us. What happens now?
The counting begins. So in 268 polling places around the state, scrutinies such as this are occurring, with results expected from 6:30 onwards throughout the evening. We also have had record numbers at pre-poll, so expecting to count close to 40,000 pre-poll counts tonight, together with postal votes, which we've received to date, which is around 17,000.
Well, I was just going to ask how many votes were there. Will you keep counting into tomorrow and beyond that if you need to?
So turnout-wise, we'll know some definite figures tomorrow. Tasmanians very much embrace their having their say at the ballot box. We tend to get about 95% turnout, which is close to about 360,000 electors around the state. The counting will go through right until late tonight, until completion. Tomorrow is very much administration work for us, moving the out-of-division ballot papers back to their own divisions, and they'll be scrutinised from Monday.
Now, the Hare-Clark system does have its complexities. Does it take the same amount of time as voting systems in other states, or a little bit longer, Nairi?
It takes longer. So for us to have a definitive outcome, we're looking at about Friday week before that'll be definite. We have a 10-day period where postal votes can still continue to be returned to us. So on Tuesday the 13th, that will close. We're then able to strike our quota and start to elect and exclude until we have 5 candidates per division.
Now, Lara Giddings conceded about 9 o'clock in the last election night. If it's a clear result, could we see a similar outcome tonight?
So with results starting from about 6:30 and with those extra large pre-poll counts coming through, we'd aim to have those figures through as quickly as we can. If that's an indicative outcome at that stage, we'd be hopeful of a similar timeframe.
Well, Nairi, good luck for tonight and for the vote counting. Thank you very much for joining us.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Peter Carline, thank you so much. Now, one person watching the count closely tonight will be former Senator Jackie Lambie, tipped early on to be a powerful force in the campaign. The Jackie Lambie Network has based themselves in Launceston tonight, from where Jackie Lambie joins us. Jackie Lambie, the election is over. You too can be candid tonight. It is going to be very hard, based on all the polls, isn't it, for your candidates to get a foothold in the Tasmanian Parliament?
Oh, mate, it's been difficult. You know, we've fought the good fight. We've done it without scandal, so I want you to remember that, Tasmanians. You've got a micro, you've had 12 people out there, and they've done us all proud. There's no doubts about that. It's made it more difficult because I lost my seat, and people are a little concerned about that. Me not running has been another concern, and I don't know why, for goodness sakes. I am the leader, you know, so it has been difficult. And then, let's be honest, going against all those millions of dollars on about $200,000, you're kidding yourself. And you can see that in the last few weeks when they actually built that propaganda out there. They throw everything they can at the newspapers. And, mate, when it comes to money, you just can't buy the Jackie Lambie Network. No amount of money can buy our integrity. And we'll remain like this, and we will prove to Tasmanians in the future that without money we can win seats. So we will continue. This is just a starting base for us, and that's all. And we've got a damn good one to start with.
Jackie Lambie, it's Richard Baines here. Initially, you were talking about the possibility of 2 seats and holding the balance of power. You've pointed there to the Liberals' campaign. Do you think that it's also been damaging for the Jackie Lambie Network, your very public spat with Steve Martin?
Well, mate, apart from you now over-advertising that, because that's crap, that went away within 24 hours. It was done very quickly, very nicely, and I moved him away from the network. It would have done more damage to the network had I kept Steve Martin in. So I put those people first, and Tasmania first. We didn't need another scene of what's going on with Barnaby Joyce out there. So when I sacked Steve Martin, when the network sacked Steve Martin, it was over and done within 24 hours. You can't have much more control than that, mate, against you journos. So bring her on.
Well, here's another one for you. Do you concede back to the state campaign? Jackie Lambie, you didn't do yourself any favours in that radio interview during the week, saying that you would favour a return of the Will Hodgman government.
Do you know what? I made it quite clear. What I don't favour is having another Green Labor disaster that we had before Will Hodgman took over, and I can tell you nobody has forgotten about that. And as soon as I mentioned that, I noticed Labor's lost some run on the boards. People are waking up. They have not forgotten how bad it was under a Green Labor government. I mean, I've got to be honest there. It was an absolute disaster for Tasmania. I'm certainly not going to sit there and lie and say I want to go back to something like that, because the network certainly doesn't, and I sure as hell don't.
Jackie Lambie, you spoke a few times during the campaign about what you believe to be smear attacks from the Liberals, but you're saying you would support them in the event of a hung parliament. How does that work?
Look, you know, what we don't want to see is everyone sitting around for 5 weeks if we were to get the balance of power. Decisions need to be made very quickly. We don't want any disruptions. We don't want any instability. And if my people are in that balance of power, they'd have to move in there fairly quickly, talk to both sides and work out who's going to lead Tasmania. So we'll see how we go. But I can tell you something else. They can go and be nasty human beings, because the only people that plays back onto themselves, if they can sleep for night time, so be it, I'll rest my case. But Jackie Lambie doesn't take we don't listen to the nonsense, we don't care, we just want to do what's best by Tasmania. So we will put all that behind us and just decide on the day who is the best leader. It's as simple as that. It's not that difficult, you know. Sticks and stones might break my bones, but names never hurt me, mate. And that's how we run.
Jackie Lambie in Launceston, thank you very much, and good luck tonight. So Erica Betts, a very pessimistic sounding Jackie Lambie there. You must be relieved somewhat that the possible threat posed in her heartland of Braddon may, according to Jackie Lambie herself, not be that real tonight.
I think the falling apart between Jackie Lambie and Steve Martin did have consequences for her state campaign. Interestingly enough, the Mayor of Glamorgan Spring Bay, Michael Kent, who's running for the Jackie Lambie Network, and they seem to have thrown a bit of support behind him. I'm not sure he's necessarily getting the traction they were hoping in the seat of Lyons, and I don't think it's looking much better for them in the seats of Braddon and Bass, so I would doubt very much that they'll win a seat.
Julie Collins, how relieved is Labor that Jackie Lambie didn't run herself, and that the polling would tell us that she's unlikely to pick up a seat?
Well, obviously, Jackie Lambie's a well-known local figure, particularly around her hometown of Burnie. There's no doubt if Jackie's name itself was on the ballot paper, we might be talking a different story, but I can't see how Jackie's going to get any of her candidates up. I don't think any of them are high profile enough. She did talk obviously about the big advertising coming from the Liberals, and that's, I think, been more prominent in the north of the state. It's obviously been right across the state, and I think a lot of Tasmanians are concerned about the amount of advertising from the Liberal Party we've seen in this campaign. I think it's pretty unprecedented, and it's interesting that Jackie raises it because I've had it raised with me every day in the last few weeks. People are just overwhelmed with the amount of advertising coming their way from the Liberal Party.
We'll get onto that a bit later on in the course of the show, but Nick McKim, Jackie Glanby, clearly not a great fan of you and your former colleagues in the former Labor Greens government.
Oh, look, that's all right. I mean, the former Labor Greens government actually did the budget repair that's allowed the Liberals to come in with a budget that's actually under control. We took a budget that actually was increasing at about 8.8% per annum in terms of public sector expenditure, and improved that down to 1.9%, which is obviously under CPI. So we did the hard yards, and the Liberals have come in and enjoyed the fruits of that. But in terms of, Jackie's comment on the amount of money that the Liberals have spent, I mean, we have seen one of the biggest political heists in Australia's history playing out in broad daylight before our very eyes. It's been an unprecedented spend by the Liberals, and I've got no doubt Tasmanians would like to know how many millions have been donated in either direct donations or in-kind advertising support from the pokies barons into the Liberal Party's coffers. And unfortunately, we didn't know that when we went to the polls today, because the Liberals have continually voted down the Greens' attempts to introduce state-based donations disclosure laws.
Well, just picking up on that, here's your chance to respond, Erica Betts. What has the Liberal Party got to hide? Will Hodgman has proved to be very defensive on this issue over the course of the campaign.
Look, not at all. The laws that applied for this election were the laws that applied whilst Nick McKim was a minister in the Green
because
Labor
you wouldn't
government.
Support our legislation.
You had the majority. You had the majority in the Green Labor government. So don't blame an opposition that does not have the numbers in the Parliament for.
You've been in government for 4 years now, Eric.
Oh, well,
you could have done something in the last 4 years.
We are satisfied with the rules, and of course, coming from Nick McKim, whose former leader Bob Brown personally negotiated and accepted the biggest political donation of $1.6 million from Graham Wood. It really is the height of cheek for Nick McKim to make that assertion in relation to big donations and individuals influencing a political party. We in the Liberal Party will, of course, accept support, but our policies are never for sale.
Senator Abetz, going forward, is it really in line with community expectation for voters not to know who's given what to who for 18 months after the polls?
That's right.
Do you think that passes the pub test?
Look, does it change the way people vote? I don't think so. I think people like you and I talk about these things in the political bubble, but I have been door knocking from Evandale to Perth, Mount Nelson, Howrah, you name it. Nobody's raised that as an issue at the doors. We like to talk about it on air, in the print media, etc., but out on the streets.
But people have been raising it on radio. They've raised it in letters to the editor. There's no doubt the community's upset about it, Eric.
No, the political activists are the ones that write the letters to the editor.
I think it's much broader than that.
A very small cohort. The number of doors that I've knocked on, not a single person raised the issue.
I don't think Tasmania can go on with no electoral laws. We have the weakest in the country.
So is we want a unity ticket here now? Do we expect whoever wins tonight there'll be serious changes to the electoral laws in the state? As you say, Julie Collins, the most lax in Australia.
I think the public will demand it. I think the public are sick of being inundated by it. I mean, I have never seen expenditure like this before. I've been involved in campaigns since 1988. I have never seen this type of expenditure. I think we were outspent 10 to 1, quite frankly, and I have never seen the amount of advertising. I've never seen people so annoyed with it. I've never seen or had people raise it with me on the doors and on the phone and when I'm out at functions like I have in this campaign. And for Eric to say nobody's raised it with him, I don't know where he was door knocking, but if he was in Howrah, I got it in Howrah.
I
got it on the radio.
I
got it in letters, saw it in letters to the editor in the newspaper. I don't think that we can pretend that the community are not upset by the amount of advertising in this campaign.
If this is such a problem, though, why didn't the former government do something about it?
Well, we did try to do that, and we also have tried federally to do it. I mean, the only laws that apply in Tasmania at the moment are federal legislation, and we will not know until January 2019 who funded what in this campaign, and I don't think the Tasmanian public are going to stand for it for much longer.
Figure in the former government.
You
had your chance, why not?
We had our chance, and we couldn't get Labor over the line on this issue until very late in the term. We actually did get legislation through the lower house late in that term, late 2013. Unfortunately, then Premier Lara Giddings pulled the plug on the upper house before they got a chance to debate it. So that was a real shame, because we would have actually had significant state-based donations disclosure laws and expenditure caps in place, because at the moment, tragically for our democracy, we have a situation where elections in Tasmania are not a contest of ideas. They're a contest who has the deepest pockets and the fattest wallets, and that's not how it should be in a democracy.
Julie Collins, with this though, this has only really become an issue for Labor since they've been being outspent. It's a bit convenient, the timing, isn't it?
Not at all. I mean, federally we have been concerned about it for some time, and we've been trying to do things ever since John Howard changed it quite a time ago. And in fact, federally we've tried to reduce it down to $1,500 and then $1,000 for anything to be disclosed. But the limit's now somewhere around $15,000. Like, I don't think you should be able to donate to political parties and not have it disclosed at that sort of level. And I don't think Tasmanians will think so after what they've seen in the last few weeks.
And Julie, you were in government for 6 years after the Howard government.
Yes, so we couldn't get it through the Senate. We did try. We have tried to do electoral reform.
You voted it down, Eric.
It is amazing.
You voted against it.
But we did, and no difficulty with that at all, but...
Well, I don't know why the Liberal Party keeps voting down...
The coalition did not have the numbers. The coalition did not have the numbers in the Senate, and so you can't assert it was the Labor Party.
We're going to have plenty of time through the night.
I think the point here is the Liberals keep voting against electoral reform.
Well, look, there's plenty more time for debate through the night. But look, let's go to the northwest, to Braddon, and by any measure, it is a Liberal stronghold. 4 of the 5 MPs up there are from the Liberal Party, and Carla Houth is with one of their most popular MPs. Adam Brooks, Carla, over to you.
Adam Brooks was first elected in 2010, and in 2014 he topped the polls. He was appointed to the ministry but was forced to resign when there was a perceived conflict of interest between his business and his portfolio. Adam, first up, Vanessa Goodwin has passed away. It must be a really sad day for the Liberal Party.
It is. Vanessa was a great champion for the community and a wonderful Attorney General, and we're all saddened by the passing of Vanessa. She was a true friend of all of us, and we're a worse place today without someone like Vanessa being not only in the Parliament but in the community. And our thoughts and prayers are with her family, and our deepest condolences.
How do you think you will poll today?
Look, at the end of the day, that's the great thing about elections. That's up to the people to decide. So it's an exciting time. Ultimately, we'll find out in a few hours or a couple of hours, and look, at the end of the day, we'll be judged on our performance and what we've been able to deliver for Tasmania, and I think we're heading in the right direction. So it's exciting to see what the numbers will be.
Are you confident that the Liberal Party will be able to retain 4 seats in Braddon?
Look, certainly that's been our goal. We've always aimed for that, and we've continued to fight for that every day. So ultimately that'll be up to the people to decide. They've had their say now. They're going to count up the numbers and go from there.
And if you're elected, are you hopeful that this conflict of interest saga can be all cleared up so you can return to the front bench?
Look, at the end of the day, I think the people will make their mind up on that at the ballot box today. So we'll see. We'll see where that leads. Hopefully, I'll be returned by the community, and then I'll continue to serve in a Hodgman majority Liberal government if that's what the community have determined.
Thanks for that, Adam.
Thanks, Carla. Awesome job.
Yes, great questions, Carla. Thank you. So you're touching on this earlier, Eric, a bit. It would be a heroic achievement, I guess, if I'm reading it correctly, for the Liberal Party to maintain those 4 seats in Braddon.
Look, it was a bit of a surprise to us when we did win 4 seats, but in fairness, the 4 members have worked exceptionally hard. Joan Ryler in particular has worked hard on the west coast and in the northwest, Smithton, the Circular Head area, Roger Jench, and of course the Deputy Premier from there as well, along with Adam Brooks. So a very strong team, and we are hopeful, but in the circumstances of the Labor Party snaring a former mayor in Anita Dow,
she'll poll strongly.
One assumes she will poll strongly, and so being realistic, my hope, of course, would be for 4 seats, but being realistic, I think it will be difficult for us, and therefore the toss-up will be whether it'll be Joan Ryler or Roger Jench, because I suspect that Adam Brooks and Jeremy Rockcliffe have sufficient traction within the electorate to be guaranteed of re-election.
So, Julie Collins, do we take that to mean then that you think that Anita Dow will top the poll for Labor, and will her support be enough to get Shane Broad over the line?
Well, I think we've got a really strong team in Braddon, and not only do we have Anita Dow and Shane Broad, but we've also got Wayne Roberts, we've got Danielle. I mean, people have been working so hard on the ground up there. I know our Braddock candidates have had thousands, tens of thousands of contacts with voters in Braddon. They've been working really, really hard. So it will be interesting to see how the numbers pan out. The other thing is a lot of our candidates are based around Burnie, and Wayne Roberts is based around Devonport, so it'll be interesting to see whether that plays a role or not too.
We'll get back to Braddon, of course, as the night goes on. Thank you both for that. Now, once a highlight of state and federal elections, the tally room is mostly, sadly, a thing of the past, but as you can see, the tradition is thankfully alive and well here in Tassie. It is open to the public, so if you're in Hobart, please pop down for a look. Otherwise, ABC Radio's Leon Compton has volunteered to play tour guide for a look behind the scenes. Over to you, Leon.
Thank you, Michael, and welcome to the tally room floor. Now, an interesting fact about tonight. Traditionally, the tally room is held at the West Point Casino, only a few miles down the road from where I'm standing now. Given that poker machines were such a contentious issue in this election campaign, the decision was made to move tonight's event to where you find us tonight. Let's look at the stage behind me. It's the place that in a few hours' time, when a winner of tonight's election is expected to be known, you will see the winner standing there and making their speech. The screens behind us clearly have journalists in the building ready and waiting for the first figures to come through. And those screens are also important because of the fact that, as you mentioned, this is the last tally room in the country and quite possibly expected to be the last one ever. Let's meet a couple of people who have come down tonight to take in some of the atmosphere. Liz, good evening.
How are you?
Liz, why have you decided to make your way out into a Hobart night tonight and enjoy the tally room?
I was in Hobart for the day and I was invited to come here anyway.
What are you hoping to see?
The Liberals get a landslide.
Let's say good evening to Ian. Ian, you're passionate about the tally room. Why?
Well, it's the absolute pinnacle of democracy. It's where we see it happening. It's the last one in Australia, and democracy should be seen to be believed.
We're only minutes away from the first numbers appearing up on the board as the votes come in. What are you expecting to happen at tonight's count?
Well, a couple of days ago I would have thought Liberal would swing over, but I think the issue of the guns, using a pun, exploded yesterday, and I think it was underhanded, and I think Port Arthur is still very raw, and it was very ill-timed.
For people watching around the country who might know what we're talking about the fact that there was a release from the Liberal Party that had been sent out to interested firearms ownership groups, and that release suggested that the Liberals, if re-elected, would make semi-automatic weapons easier to access, introduce silencers for some in primary production, and also relax some storage laws. Guns are a very thorny issue in this state, as you might imagine, given, as Ian mentioned, the legacy of Port Arthur. The ABC's election coverage is a little bit like an iceberg. Through the course of the night, you'll be looking at a relatively limited number of people up on stage in front of you. But behind the scenes, there is an enormous amount of work going on. And you can see some of that happening amongst the dozen or so people here with me now who are concentrating on the information our presenters are getting and what you see up on the screen. Selena Ross is been voted the person with the best grammar at the ABC in Tasmania, and so is her the job of deciding what you see on what we call the straps and strings under your screen. Selena, good evening.
Hello there, Leon.
Right, Selena, so your role throughout the course of the night?
So I am looking after, as you said, the text strap at the bottom of the screen. So all the information that's coming through on that, we've got some of the results. We'll be having campaign quotes and quotes as we get them through the evening. Right,
what is literally the next thing that people are going to see up on the screen in front of them?
So we have a stat from BAS about, here it is here, Labor's Michelle O'Byrne is likely to be re-elected with a full quota.
If you have any grammar issues tonight, Selena M. Ross is her Twitter handle, and we encourage you to get in touch. Well, we, with the exception of Selena. So you can see some of the scenes here already, the crowd starting to fill up in the seats behind me. The votes expected in moments from now to go up on the board, and throughout the course of the night, I'll be bringing you interviews with the candidates as they come through and asking them the questions about how they're feeling about the night, their chances, and the election itself. And of course, up behind me here, something a little different in the way the ABC is covering elections tonight. It's our Facebook Live team, and I'll take you there a little bit later in the hour.
Leon, you're wasted as a radio presenter. I expect you to be running private tours at Salamanca Place after that. Thank you so much. We'll go back to Leon Compton on the floor of the tally room a bit later on. Now, as we go around the grounds tonight, let's go back up north where our colleague Linda Hunt has right next to a high-profile Labor MP, Michelle O'Byrne. Linda.
Yes, Labor's Michelle O'Byrne was first elected to the Tasmanian Parliament in 2006. She's a former health minister in the previous Labor government, and she's been the deputy Labor leader since 2014. Now, Michelle, you are expected to be returned with a full quota. What are you hearing from scrutineers who've been out and about?
Well, before I touch on that, I do want to pass on my sympathy and that of the broader Labor Party to the family and friends of Vanessa Goodwin. Vanessa was a work colleague and incredibly well respected across the political spectrum, and we know that today must be a very difficult day for her family. As to what we're hearing, so far the feedback has been very positive, both from some of the exit polling, but primarily because Labor knows that we have run an incredibly positive campaign. We can stand tonight, regardless of the outcome, very proud of the campaign that we ran and very proud of the work ethic and the decency of our leader, Rebecca White.
Are you hopeful of picking up that extra seat in Bass?
Look, I look forward to being joined in the Parliament by another Labor Bass member, and I'm really hopeful that one of our 4 fantastic candidates will be there with me. And we hope to pick up seats all across the state. That's actually vital. I do recall that when the Liberals first lost to us in 1998, they stayed at such a low number for a very long time. We're looking forward to a very positive outcome tonight.
Talking of some of the other seats out there, your brother David O'Byrne is trying to get back into Franklin. Are you feeling hopeful of sitting next to your brother back in Parliament again?
Can you imagine how my mother feels right now? Look, we are very hopeful for David. He's run a great campaign. He was a phenomenally well-respected minister, and we do hope that to see him return tonight. But as everyone knows, Hare Clark is an incredible beast, and everyone has gone in pretty much equal, and we'll see how the polls play out tonight. But delivering more Labor seats, of course, will be the outcome, I think, of what a positive campaign that we have run.
Michelle O'Byrne, thank you.
Thank you, Linda.
I have asked the Governor for the state to hold an election on March the 3rd.
Hang on a moment, just control my wayward hair.
If the audit finds that
That was your last question 3 questions ago, but keep going.
I'm just going to pretend there's somebody there to talk to.
Oh, sorry.
Freedoms of speech that the Greens so often talk about.
Well, let's leave the Greens out of it then.
Well, you mentioned them.
Just to warn you, ladies, I do talk with my hands a bit.
Okay, right. Oh, sorry. Sorry.
The Premier can't ride a motorbike, but he's happy to be seen on one.
We remain the underdog, but we've got a fantastic team of candidates.
My arm's not long enough.
We won't do any deals with any minor parties.
Why would you want to go back?
Some of the highlights of this 5-week election campaign in Tasmania ending tonight on election night. And in some breaking news, Anthony Green, we have some first figures.
Yeah, very early figures. We'll just show them to show that they start to arrive. This is from, let me see, it's from Lady Barron, which is on Flinders Island, if I remember, and Piper's River. So it's very strong Liberal vote. Now, I'll explain this for everyone who hasn't followed the Hare Clark election before. On the first display, we list the names of the parties. The seats, the numbers on the left-hand side of your screen there are the current numbers of members by party. We then have the quotas and the percentage. And the quota number here is important. A full number corresponds to a seat, and the remainder corresponds to the battle for the final figures. At the moment, these aren't corrected for where the data is from. This is raw data, and on these polling booths, you'd expect the Liberal vote to be quite high. So that's one display we'll be looking at tonight. And the other one, which we'll talk about more later, when the figures are more meaningful, is we show the votes by candidate. Because in Tasmania, as I said, they're competing between candidates as well as for the overall party vote. So at the moment, moment, Peter Gutwin and Michael Ferguson are well ahead on the Liberal vote with the quota. Michelle O'Byrne well up. And then the votes for the other candidates are much down, very much further down there. But that's only 0.5%, two quite small booths, and we'll be coming back to the figures. But it's always, for me, a great relief when I see the first figures come in, because it means it's working.
You're off the mark.
I'm off
Good
the
to
mark.
see.
Plenty more figures to come through the night. Well, Bass is one of the seats where the Greens are going to struggle to keep their member, and we're joined now by Greens leader Cassie O'Connor. Cassie, good evening. Now that the voting has been done, what's your prediction for the Greens tonight?
Well, we're just hoping for the best possible result, Richard. We've worked so hard over the past 5 weeks putting forward policies that we know mean something to Tasmanians. So we can't know, obviously, what the result will be, but I think every Green lead candidate and member can hold their heads up high for campaigning hard for the love of this island and its people.
And Cassie O'Connor, do you concede that the Greens have struggled to get traction on one particular issue this campaign?
Well, what I can concede is that we've been significantly outspent by the Labor Party and massively outspent by the Liberals, who had millions of dollars rolling into their campaign from the gambling industry. I know that we campaigned hard. I know that we talked about the issues that matter to Tasmanians: donations reform, an inquiry into foreign ownership and influence, making sure we invest in our public education system, invest in our child safety system, protect our national parks, marine environment, our beautiful forests. I know we talked about things that really matter to people, and I think every Green in Tasmania should hold their head up high.
Well, Cassie O'Connor, just on that, you went across a range of issues there. Is that not the problem the Greens have had, that they haven't had a narrative, they haven't had one thing to focus in on?
Well, our narrative is that you need the Greens in the Parliament. You need a strong voice for Tasmania's environment. You need a voice for communities who the Labor and Liberal parties play deaf to. You need an honest broker, a party that can't be bought and won't sell out. Our narrative is one of, for 35 years, being true to this beautiful island and its people. And what we were saying to Tasmanians this election, for the love of Tasmania, vote Green, it's about that, because our economic and political legacy to this island is clean and green, and it's what's holding this island's economy in good stead today. The protection of our forests, the protection of our landscapes, these are the things that the Greens have championed for decades.
Cassie O'Connor, let's put the election aside for 1 minute. We've had some tragic news this afternoon. Vanessa Goodwin was someone you got extremely well with.
It's really cast a pall over today. Vanessa was just one of the really good people, sweet-natured, intelligent, really hard-working. I've known Vanessa for about 15, 20 years. She's just a lovely person, and I want to, on behalf of all the Greens, pass on our love and empathy to Vanessa's family and friends, and to everyone in the Liberal Party who loved her so much. It is a very sad day.
Cassie O'Connor, we'll come back to you over the course of the night. Thank you so much. And just if I can bring you in, Nick McKim, worst case scenario, I guess the Greens are left with two. Really worst case scenario one. Have the Greens peaked in Tasmania?
Michael, I've heard that in my political career about 10,000 times. It's been wrong every time I've heard it, and it's wrong, in my view, to suggest that today. Look, in terms of a narrative, I think Cassie's absolutely right. I mean, we've run a strong campaign about looking after the place, looking after the people. We've campaigned strongly against the privatisation of our national parks that the Liberals want to engage in, the privatisation of public waterways that both Labor and Liberal want to engage in by handing over vast swathes of coastal water and coastline to the fish farm industry. I mean, I think we have had a narrative. The problem is that we've been so radically outspent, not only by Labor, but as Cassie said, massively outspent by the Liberal Party. And if we get an outcome that's not as good as we would like tonight, I'll be saddened for the things that the Greens represent, but I'll be even more saddened for the corruption of our democracy that's occurred in this election, thanks to the gaming industry's support for the Liberal Party.
OK, Nick McKim, thank you so much. Let's take you straight back to Anthony Green at his plasma. Always up to date with the figures, and we have some more figures coming in.
we'll get to Braddon. We've got two very small polling places in Braddon, and again, 3.6, 61%. 4 Liberals and 1 Labor, as I said from last time. First polling booths. I'll just tell you where these are from. These are Edith Creek and Natone. They're very tiny.
Yeah.
So,
They are very tiny.
There's actually not much change in vote actually occurred in those two. It's not reflected in those numbers. But so it's, again, not a lot you can say, but we have to bring up these numbers. I just note there's 7.4% for ungrouped. That's Brenton Best. Question of whether that will be maintained through the rest of the votes. There's a lot to watch in Braddon there. And I'll have a look at the leading candidates, and I haven't looked at it. And it's, again, 4 Liberals. Craig Garland. Oh, well, I was wrong about Brenton Best. He's the fisherman. He's obviously maybe from the town he's from. You do get a little bit of that in Tasmania. And I'll just do...
What do you mean, Anthony Green?
Yeah, it's a local town, local vote for local people.
Oh, people vote for locals.
They do.
And I'll just do one quick thing. I'll just do I'll have to go home for this. The overall party totals. This is corrected for the vote as it's coming in. So we've got 5 polling places. We've corrected for the vote where that's from at the moment. And actually we're seeing Labor vote up, Jackie Lammy's vote up, Green vote down, and others down. Remember, there was a vote for about 6.5. About 5 of that was with Clive Palmer last time. So that looks like it might have transferred over to Jackie Lambie. But again, these are early figures, but the first figures haven't shown a drop in the Liberal vote at this stage.
Okay.
Very early days.
Anthony Green, very early days. Let's stress that. Thank you so much. Erica Betts, the last day of the campaign wasn't all that Will Hodgman had hoped for with the revelation a re-elected Liberal government would loosen gun laws in this state. Incredible pushback from gun control groups, emotional pushback from Walter Micak. Will this hurt the Liberal Party vote?
Oh, look, I hope not, and thank you for raising this issue, because it was quite outrageous how the media played this, where I have in front of me tonight a letter signed by Rebecca White dated the 27th of February 2018, so just a matter of a few days ago, with basically identical policy going to the Tasmanian Farmers and Graziers Association concerning regulatory issues encountered by farmers, and that a re-elected Labor government would take immediate action to meet and consult with the TFGA on this. So what we have are both sides of politics accepting, especially for the farming community, that there were certain matters, and Will Hodgman made it very clear that the National Firearms Agreement would remain intact, and anything that would be done would be within the confines of that agreement. And so it's been a very bad beat-up, and very sad that the journalists that ran it did not give as much prominence to Rebecca White's overtures to the firearm owners, organisations and clubs.
Julie Collins,
it's
have
quite
you got
a
similar
letter.
policy?
No, we
Of
do
course
not.
she does.
No, we do not. And it's quite a different letter. I mean, Rebecca's undertaking to consult to talk about issues. The Liberal Party letter has very clear in it that they are going to make changes. Right. And they say they are going to make changes in their letter. It's quite a different thing. And Rebecca has been very clear that Labor is not up for the changes that the Liberal Party is talking about. I mean, we're talking about more access to semi-automatic weapons. I mean, that is the point. And I think that it's outrageous because I haven't heard anything in the last 4 years about the need for this to occur. It's not been in the public arena before. And then all of a sudden, here we are on the eve of the election. It's just extraordinary, and I think it might actually help us with more votes in southern Tasmania, particularly in Denison.
Julie Collins, are you saying that Labor will try to block this legislation in the next Parliament, or will they try to amend it?
Well, obviously I'm not in the State Parliament, Richard, but Rebecca has been pretty clear that we are not up for the reforms as detailed in Reen Hitting's letter for the Liberal Party.
But if there are some similarities between the two major parties,
well, there aren't similarities between the two major parties. Rebecca's been pretty clear that we are not up for the same reforms that the Liberal Party has in its letter.
We'll go to Erica Betts and bring Nick McKibben. Yes, go.
Because the Rebecca White letter says, and I quote, address the legitimate concerns that have been highlighted by the TFGA. So Rebecca White, the Labor leader, has publicly
Rebecca is not saying in there that she is going to do the same as what Reen Hitting is.
She acknowledges that there are legitimate concerns, and of course Rebecca White comes from a farming background, so it stands to reason that she might actually understand these legitimate concerns. And so to try to whip it up as Julie has when her state leader has acknowledged that there are legitimate concerns that need to be addressed indicates that Liberal and Labor are exceptionally close on this, and the National Firearms Agreement remains intact, and anything that is done will be a simple tweak and not a change to that agreement.
But do you concede, both of you, I guess, and I'll bring you in as well, Nick McKim, talking about winding back gun laws in this state, of all the states in Australia, is particularly fraught?
And that is why I think the use of the terminology winding them back as opposed to a tweak to assist our farming community to undertake their very important tasks. Legitimate concerns, to quote Rebecca White, is the right thing to do.
She's talking about consulting with them about concerns. She's not talking about changing the laws, Eric.
No,
she was very clear on TV yesterday that Labor is not up for the reforms that you're up for. They're quite different.
Julie, I don't interrupt you, and can I just repeat, the TFGA have made representations about this and have raised what Rebecca White says in this letter as legitimate concerns that have been highlighted. The Liberal Party has also accepted they are legitimate concerns and are willing to address them, just like Labor.
Nick Kim, we'll bring you in here. Are there legitimate concerns that need to be addressed?
Well, I'll tell you what, there's a legitimate concern that needs to be addressed about Erica Betts' heroic attempt at spinning the Liberals' position here. I mean, let's be really clear. What the Liberals are proposing is to double the length of time that a licence will be able to be obtained from 5 years to 10 years. That is a clear and egregious breach of the National Firearm Agreement. It is beyond belief that the Liberals will try to water down gun control laws in Tasmania, but not only that, keep it secret from the Tasmanian people and only release it to the shooting lobby. Didn't even consult with Gun Control Australia on these changes. And that brings me to the other crucial point of this election. The Liberals released 300 policies. They only released publicly 100 of the 300, and I'm here to tell you tonight, if you don't put your policies before all of the voters, you cannot claim a mandate for those policies, and that includes the policy to breach the National Firearm Agreement that the Liberals were sprung on in the last 24 hours.
Just very quickly, we need to move on. Why didn't you put it out there on the Liberal Party website?
Why didn't you put it out, Eric?
Whether you like it or not, it is out there. The people do know about it.
Only because the Australian newspaper put it on the front page yesterday, Eric.
If the Liberals do get a majority, are you now saying because the people know about it, the Greens will vote for it?
No, we will.
The few that you will have.
No,
in the Tasmanian
we will do as we've always done. And vote against weakening gun control.
Excuse me. We had as many as 5 policy announcements a day from the Liberals. If there was the need for this, why wasn't this announcement made, and was it dishonest not to let voters consume this information before the election?
During the election campaign, parties write to various organisations just as much as Rebecca White did. Now, did Rebecca White hold a press conference on the 27th of February 2018 to announce that she acknowledged that the farmers of the state had legitimate concerns requiring changes to the firearms legislation? No, she did not. So I say to the ABC commentators here this evening, the same standard that you are now seeking to force upon the Liberal Party should also be forced upon Rebecca White and the Labor Party.
It is a very different thing. It's about consulting. You don't put out a policy document saying you're going to consult with somebody. Your letter actually had policy changes in it, and it was a policy. It is a very different thing.
OK, Julie Collins, Erica Betts, Nick McKim, we'll move on. Undoubtedly, this will be an issue as the night goes on. Now, apart from Tasmania, votes on television, the ABC is also dishing up the sizzle on Facebook tonight. So if you've ever wondered what those silky smooth radio voices look like, Leon Compton has some of them with him now on the tally room floor.
I do indeed, and as you can see from looking at the media that are gathered here to report tonight from all around Australia, things have changed very much in the way that reporting is done from even one election ago. And that is true for the ABC, evolving, taking on new platforms, and tonight we're taking on Facebook Live. It looks different, it feels different. Let's have a little bit of a settle in with our Sizzle team and find out what they have in store for us tonight. Rick Goddard is the breakfast presenter on ABC Hobart. Rick, good evening to you.
Hi, Leon. How are you going?
I'm very well. Rick, it looks different. What will be different about the Sizzle tonight?
What's different about the Sizzle is that you can talk back to us. So we're on Facebook Live the whole time, so you can comment on the Facebook page, engage, ask us questions. We're going to play Political Pictionary, where you can challenge us to draw political satire because we couldn't afford a cartoonist.
and singing as well, I believe.
Yeah, Dean Stevenson will be in that chair, turning this election into the celebration of democracy it should be, through song.
Through song, indeed. Right, let's just get down the road. Just excuse me, Kingy. Let's get down the road. Rihanna Whitson is with the Sizzle team as well. Rihanna, who will you have joining you this evening?
Hi, Leon. As you heard, we're going to have Dean Stevenson on. He's going to be making up some pretty cool political songs on the spot. We're going to have Ingrid Harrison. She's a communications expert, telling us how badly or well she thinks the campaigns have been run. And we're also going to have some spinners, media advisors from the major parties, and also pulling people off the tally room floor, so some MPs and senators.
Right, and finally, Rick, how do people find you if they want to enjoy the Sizzle tonight?
So you find us on Facebook Live. So you go to the ABC Hobart Facebook page or the ABC News Facebook page in Tasmania, and then you can follow the live feed and comment on it. Also, we've got the same election information Anthony Green has. We'll just be interpreting it slightly differently, but you'll be up to date with all the facts.
I can already smell it starting to brew. It's the Sizzle. It'll be kicking off at 7 o'clock on Facebook.
And hopefully, thank you, Leon, there's something nice and refreshing and cold in those eskies for us to drink a bit later on. Soft drink, of course. Now, Anthony Green, more figures are coming in. Take us through them.
Look, we'll show the statewide figures just simply because these are corrected for where the vote is from. And at the moment, the Liberals are on 49.9. We're projecting Labor 38, the Greens on 3.4. Now, I should say this is heavily biased by the fact that all the figures are from Bass, Bryans and Lyons and Braddon. There's nothing from Franklin or Denison yet, and that's where the Green vote and the Labor vote will be stronger. So this is biased in that sense. And what we're seeing a change in vote, much of this is caused by some very poor figures for the Greens in the first figures from Lyons. But Lyons is a very variable electorate, and you need to know which part of the electorate the information is from. Now, I need to explain that I've given away 3 seats. And that's simply that in Bass it's pretty clear who's won the first 3 seats. In fact, you know, if we wanted to, we could start this election with 10 seats given away even before we start, but we feel we must wait for some votes to arrive, which I think is only fair enough. If we look at, I've got to select Bass first. If you look at the party totals here, the Liberals are on 3.76. There's only 1,000 votes here I'm talking about, but and this does have early figure bias towards the Liberal Party because you get smaller rural booths first. Right. But the leaders' figures are pretty clear that Peter Gutwin, Michael Ferguson and Michelle O'Byrne will clearly head the tickets of each party, and they will be the first 3 elected. So we've given away 2 Liberal seats and 1 Labor seat in Bass at this stage. Now, I wanted to do the first figures for Lyons, so they're very early figures and they're from a bit from all over the place. But the Liberal vote is holding up at this stage, the Labor Party on 1.6. Obviously, from rural areas, the Shooters Party is doing very well at this stage, and Shooters, Fishers and Farmers, we couldn't fit the full name on, unfortunately, but 0.37 and Tasmanian Greens 0.32. But at this stage, they're quite early figures, and we'll be waiting for later in the evening. But it's a very different sort of electorate lines. You really need to know exactly where each of the polling places is from. But at this stage, on the 3 northern electorates, there's no swing against the Liberal Party, but we've got nothing from Bass, from Denison or Franklin yet.
We'll watch those results as they come in. Thank you so much, Anthony Green. Now, Labor leader Rebecca White will be visiting the tally room later tonight and no doubt will be accompanied by many party supporters. In the meantime, the Labor faithful are gathering in Newtown. And I'm sure watching our coverage tonight. Hello to all of you. ABC reporter Peter Carline is there as well. Peter, how are you reading the mood of the room there?
Michael, it's very buoyant. I'm going to have to shout into this microphone. The house band started up. It's packed to the rafters here, and everyone is in a very good mood indeed. I'm joined tonight by Ella Haddad. She is the Labor candidate for Denison. You can hear all that support here. Lots of love in the room tonight. She has worked in the health and community sector for 17 years. She's also a young mum. Ella Haddad, thank you for joining us. How are you feeling?
I think you can hear from the mood tonight, Peter. The mood is good. I think Labor's run a really positive campaign on the issues that people care about, like health, like jobs, and you can hear for yourself it's a good mood in here tonight.
Now, it has been quite a long campaign, 5 weeks. The polls earlier this week showed that the Liberals were in front. How are you feeling on the back of your campaign, and what do you think the strengths of it were?
I think the strengths of my personal campaign has been the volunteer commitment. I've been overwhelmed by the number of people who've come forward and wanted to volunteer on my campaign, and we've worked incredibly hard with a really grassroots-led campaign, door knocking and phone calling, and that's been the real strength of of the campaign overall. We've got a real chance of 3 seats in Denison. It's an absolute possibility, and I've worked my hardest to try and be one of those 3.
And what about the overall vote? Do you think Labor can claim victory?
I think Labor can claim victory. Under Rebecca White's leadership, we've seen a fresh and renewed Labor Party. It's absolutely possible. As everyone said, the poll that counts is the one that's just closed this evening, and I think we can really hope against hope that it's a possibility that we could form government tonight under Rebecca's leadership.
Ella Haddad, thank you very much for joining us, and we'll let you get back to your supporters here.
Peter, thanks very much.
And welcome back. We're showing you a tracking shot inside Tasmania's House of Assembly, and the big question tonight, which bums will sit on which green seats in those 25-seat member House of Assembly. All will be revealed as the night goes on. It is just on 7 o'clock Australian Eastern Daylight Time. 1% of the vote has been counted. Anthony Green brings us back in with the latest figures.
I'll do Franklin and then I'll do the statewide figures again. We've got the first figures from Franklin. They're from Barnes Bay, Middleton and Southport. So 2 of them are relatively strong for the Greens.
Yeah.
And you're seeing that in the early figures. The Green vote is on 1.3 quotas, 22% of the vote. But in fact, on those 3 booths, the Green vote is down about 4%, and the Liberal vote's relatively unchanged. So they're 3. They're outside of the metropolitan area of Hobart, so they're not representative of the electorate as a whole. But that high Green vote is actually reflective of the booths. It's actually down compared to last time. So, I mean, what the Liberal Party want and we'll just look at the leaders here, because Will Hodgman's well ahead there with nearly 2 quotas. Rosalie Woodruff's got a quota in her own right. I'd expect the Greens will get a quota, but it's not quite as high as the current figures. And David O'Byrne, Alison Standen and Kevin Midson are the 3 competing Labor candidates who probably for the 2 seats they're likely to get, potentially the 3 if they do well. Now, I just want to go back to the statewide figures, because, again, we're able to correct the figures with where they're from at this stage. Finally got some Franklin figures. The Liberal vote's down a little bit now. Labor 36.5. The Greens are now up a bit. Jackie Lambie Network on 5.2. And the change in vote we're seeing is a small drop in the Liberal vote. There's been a significant rise in the Labor vote that we're seeing so far. A lot of that has come from the Greens. Again, I'm waiting to see whether that flows through to Denison, whether that's reflective of all polling places. But we've got about 19 polling places, and that's the trend we're seeing so far. As I said, you just with 1.6%, these trends bobble around. But there's certainly more reliable figures than the raw numbers at the moment, which have the Liberal Party vote extremely high just at the moment, because you'd expect that early figures. But there's a lot more to come, and we'll just keep everyone up to date. In the next hour, we start to see the votes just pour in. I should explain to people on the mainland who are wondering why I think it's after 7 o'clock and we've only got 1.6%. There's about 20 to 30 candidates on the ballot paper. And to blow the mind of scrutineers from the mainland, the candidates aren't always in the same order. That if there's 5 Liberal candidates on the ticket on the ballot paper, there's 10 different orders of them to randomise the donkey vote. And there's no how to vote. And so when they're counting the votes, the poor old scrutineers and counters don't just look at one spot on the ballot paper all the time. They've got to hunt round and find the name with the number 1 and put it on the right pile. So it does take a while to get the early figures in. And it's even more fun for the scrutineers, who are only the best can figure out where the preferences are flowing.
Anthony Green, and let's bring in our panellists. Obviously, Tasmania has the best scrutineers in the country. Based on that, do your figures respectively coming in, do they correlate with what we just heard from Anthony, starting with you, Erica Betts?
Yes, in fact, earlier on in the evening, I got feedback from scrutineers that Will Hodgman, David O'Byrne for Labor in Franklin and Rosalie Woodruff were doing exceptionally well. In the seat of Lyons, albeit these are smaller regional booths, sitting member, the Speaker, Mark Shelton, seems to be doing exceptionally well. On that list of Franklin booths, one assumes there aren't many Eastern Shore booths, and one would assume Jackie Petrusma, sitting minister, would be on the leaders board there somewhere once those figures come in.
Julie Collins?
Certainly they are. We're obviously seeing a swing to Labor and a swing against both the Liberals and the Greens tonight so far, and I'm pretty happy with that.
A little bit early to start calling the election on that basis, or even that'll continue through the night in our view. Look, I'm getting some stuff from our scrutineers. Newtown, which is an inner city northern Hobart booth, Labor preferences flowing either green or exhausting, which is interesting because there has been a bit of a push on from the anti-pokies campaign to not vote for any Liberal candidates. So if that's holding true, that might speak to the north-south divide we were talking about earlier.
Let's stick with the pokies issue. One of the big issues, if not in many people's eyes, one of the biggest issues in the campaign. The Labor Party's been very strongly pushing at Julie Collins, but we had that poll fairly recently that said only 14% of Tasmanians would switch their vote based on pokies. So I guess I'm asking, is Rebecca White ahead of Tasmanian public opinion on the pokies front?
I don't think so. I think just because it's not one of the prominent or the prominent issue for people changing their vote, I still think it's something that is important to a lot of people. Certainly when people vote at the ballot box, it's usually more than one issue. Obviously health and education are always pretty high and jobs in the economy are always pretty high. But this is a position of conviction for Rebecca. I think anybody that's heard her talk about what has happened in her experience and the people talking to her, particularly people that have lost everything, she's really passionate about this. And, you know, she was pretty brave and bold, and I think it's a hallmark of her leadership. And I think tonight's swing to the ALP debate's showing that people believe in Rebecca because of her stance.
Julie Collins, as a senior Labor MP, do you personally support removing poker machines from Tasmania's pubs and clubs?
I think it's the right policy for Tasmania at the right time. I don't think you get very many opportunities. It's a unique opportunity. I think it's quite a different situation to what we have elsewhere in the country. I mean, these licences are up and it's an opportunity in the right time. And, you know, I'm obviously not in the state parliament, but yes, I absolutely support it. I think it's the right policy for Tasmania.
Does Bill Shorten share your view on that?
Well, I think Bill's been pretty clear that, you know, it is a different situation here in Tasmania. I mean, one family owns all the licences. It is a unique time.
But that's going to stop.
It's a unique time when the licences are up. So, you know, I don't think Bill sees it as an issue that he needs to involve himself in. It's one for Tasmania, and he's very supportive of Rebecca.
He's been down here a few times to back the campaign, but he doesn't want to get involved in really Labor's key issue.
Well, he's totally and completely backed Rebecca, and it's her position. So, you know, he is backing everything that Rebecca has done to date in terms of the policies. I mean, Rebecca has been really brave on this, and she's been pretty bold on it, and she's standing up for what she believes in.
Eric Abetz, you...
Not only that, but the rest of the party. I mean, it wasn't just Rebecca, obviously. There was a lot of the same view within the Labor caucus.
You say the federal group monopoly is going to stop, and that certainly is Liberal Party policy, but also Liberal Party policy, if re-elected, will see these licences gifted to these pubs and clubs. Licences worth, depending on who you believe, anywhere between $150 and $250 million. It's a windfall for these pubs and clubs.
Oh, look, that is very simplistic. The simple fact is that the Labor government, some 15 years ago, provided this licence to federal hotels. Some of us had certain views, but the simple fact is that this is what we are now dealt with. To try to abolish poker machines out of pubs and clubs would have severe impacts, not only for the businesses but for employment as well. And one of the bizarre things in this campaign, which should have been highlighted, quite frankly, a lot more, who were two of the biggest backers of this change? The horse racing industry and Mona, both sectors that make their money from other people losing their money through gambling. So they hardly come to the issue with clean hands. What they're doing is seeking a larger market share for themselves, of course, and how do they make their money? By people losing. Now, before the advent of poker machines, lots of people sadly lost their livelihoods on the horses, on the cards, at the tables in the casino, and just getting rid of poker machines in hotels and clubs. It's a bit like saying alcoholism is a problem, so we're just going to ban beer but not other beverages. And it was not a well thought out policy by Labor, but I've got to give credit to the Greens. It is yet another example of where the Labor Party have taken their policy direction from the Greens, and nowadays you can virtually predict what the Labor Party policy is going to be in 5 years' time by asking what's the Greens' policy today.
Yeah, just very quickly, we need to move on from this issue to get some more votes coming in. Very quickly.
Yeah, very quickly, Michael. I rarely agree with Eric, but he's right about if you want to know what Labor's going to do in 5 years' time, look at what the Greens are doing now. But I do want to make the point here. When there was a debate in Tasmania in the 90s about whether poker machines should go out of the casinos into the pubs and clubs, Greg Farrell, the head of the federal group, was in the Tasmanian Parliament arguing it would cost lost jobs to put poker machines out into the community. And now here we are decades later, the same person who's profited from hundreds of millions of dollars of dirty pokies money based on misery in the Tasmanian community is now arguing against the position he put decades ago.
OK, we'll come back to this issue as the night goes on. Thank you all. Let's move on to the seat of Bass, Anthony Green, with just more than 2% of the vote counted. How's it looking in the northeast?
Well, if we look at Bass, I think we've got a higher count. We've got 1.8. I think I've got some newer figures coming in. At the moment, it's 3.5 quotas for the Liberal Party. So I'll look at you've got 1.48 there with Labor, the Greens 0.48. I had some new figures just arriving and I haven't had a chance to look at them in the computer, so I'll go on these numbers. The Jackie Lambie network on 0.3%. If we look at the leading candidates, as I said, Peter Gutwin's well over a quota, Michael Ferguson, Michelle O'Byrne. Now, I think last time I looked, the second Labor candidate currently is Owen Powell, who's the one candidate from the rural part of the electorate for the Labor Party. So this shows you that this has come from outside of Launceston. 70% of the electors of Bass are within Launceston. So it's Launceston that determines this electorate. So I wouldn't expect Owen Powell to continue to be second on that ticket. But at this stage, on the numbers I've looked at, the Liberal vote is only slightly down so far, which is good for them in terms of being on track to winning 3 seats.
Yeah, thank you, Anthony.
Can I quickly say, I think Peter Gutwin has put in a stellar performance as Treasurer of our state, and Michael Ferguson, in a very difficult portfolio, has dealt with health exceptionally well. And in Bass, those two gentlemen considered in very high regard, and those two with the hard work of Sarah Courtney as well. And then they were backed up by a Mayor of Georgetown and an Alderman from the Launceston City Council, so a very strong team. It's good to see the Liberal Party vote holding in Bass.
Senator Abetz, do you see Peter Gutwin as a successor to Will Hodgman as Liberal leader one day?
Oh, look, I suppose anything's possible, but I don't think Will Hodgman's going anywhere. Peter Gutwin's got great leadership skills, as we can see by his handling of the Treasury portfolio. But can I say one of the great things about the Liberal Party and why I am hopeful that they will be re-elected and in fact deserve to be re-elected has been the leadership stability, no leaks from Cabinet, a united front, and I know the people involved, they do fight in Cabinet, but they come out united, they don't leak against each other, and they've been exceptionally loyal to the leader, and there's no talk about changing leaders. OK, let's leave that there and stay in Bass, though, for the time being. Our colleague Laura Beavers is the Jackie Lambie function in beautiful Launceston tonight. Laura, how's it looking there? Not many people.
I'm with Jackie Lambie Network Bass candidate Michelle Holt. Michelle, what is the mood like amongst yourself and your fellow JLN candidates?
Laura, we've had a great day today. We're getting so much good feedback on the ground. The mood is really optimistic. So we're excited to see what the night brings, not just for us, but for all the parties involved.
Do you think that you or any of your fellow candidates with the JLN have a chance of getting elected?
Oh, look, you can't get into this kind of race without being hopeful and, you know, really giving it everything that you've got. And I think we've given it everything that we've got. We don't have big budgets, so we have been really about boots on the ground, building a real grassroots campaign and connecting to people on a one-on-one level. And the community has really responded to that way.
And how have you found the actual campaign, getting out there and campaigning?
Yeah, well, as a primary school teacher, I actually went back to work a few weeks ago. So I've had to fit in campaigning before and after school and on the weekends. But my whole family has rallied behind me and we've been out letterbox dropping together and door knocking together, and really, really blessed to have those people supporting me.
And we had a bit of a chat earlier with your daughter Poppy, who's a bit like your campaign manager. Why does she want you to be elected?
Oh, look, she wants me to be elected because she knows how much I want to help people. All the time she's seeing me going off to meetings and on the phone late at night, and she's like, you know, what are you doing? And it's like, well, you know, people need our help, and that's what I'm trying to do. I just really want to serve the state of Tasmania and the people of Bass, and so that's why she wants to see me elected, because she knows how much I want to help people.
Michelle Holt, thank you.
Thank you.
Laura Beavers in Launceston, thank you so much for that. OK, let's go back to Anthony Green with the latest figures from the seat of Braddon. Anthony.
Yes, and this is quite an interesting set of results at the moment. The Liberal Party is on 3.44 quotas, 57%. I've got some comparison of booths, and that figures down more towards 52%, which is 3 full quotas. The Labor Party's on 1.26. Jackie Lambie Network's on 0.47 and 7.8%. Got 0.39 with the ungrouped candidates, 0.23 for the Greens. This is the weakest of the Green seats. It's also mainly small booths at the moment, and the Greens don't do particularly well in the small rural parts of that electorate where they're doing some electorates like Franklin. 0.17 quotas with the Shooters Party. Let's look at the leaders display, and at the moment we've decided we're about to give away Jeremy Rockcliffe, Adam Brooks as elected. They're both clearly on a quota. Anita Dow and Shane Broad, if there's 2 Labor candidates, 2 Labor members elected, they're the 2 leading candidates at this stage, but we're unable to determine which of them we can definitely say. But I think we're pretty confident that Jeremy Rockcliffe and Adam Brooks will go on to win elections. So at the moment, John Raller's ahead of Roger Jensch, but I think John Raller's... The early figures, you have a lot of the circular head vote, which is the council at the western end of Tasmania for people on the mainland who think I'm making some sort of a joke. But John Raller's from that end of the electorate, and that comes in quite early, and so that may fall when you get the Devonport and Burnie booths. So we'll see what happens later in the evening.
I'm learning all these new terms. Circular head, I had not heard that either as well. Andy Green, so much. Thank you so much. Nick McKim, your thoughts on Braddon?
Well, look, Braddon was always going to be a difficult seat for us at this election. I mean, we've got a great candidate, one of the great characters of Tasmanian politics in Scott Jordan, and a real hero of the Tarkine. But in relation to the Liberal votes, it's important to realise that both Adam Brooks and Joan Ryler are champions of four-wheel drivers ripping up Aboriginal cultural heritage that's of global significance, and I would expect any surplus from Adam Brooks to flow strongly through to Joan Ryler rather than Roger Jensch.
Erica Betts?
Look, the campaign's over, and for Nick to make those sort of comments, there's a difference between allowing people the recreational activity of four-wheel driving and wrecking Indigenous heritage.
You are absolutely trashing it, Eric. You're absolutely trashing it. By putting rubber mats over Aboriginal heritage 40,000 years plus, and you want to put rubber mats over the top of that so people can hoon over it on four-wheel drives.
Unabated. It's like this in the Senate, it's like this on the panel. You start speaking and they have to interrupt because they always know better. And it's that supercilious attitude that costs you votes, especially in electorates like Braddon.
Senator Abetz, on that point, in Braddon there was some conjecture as to whether Adam Brooks would run again. He's an immensely popular MP. Will he return to Cabinet after the election?
Oh, look, that's for Will Hodgman. Let's get elected first in our own right, and if that occurs, then, of course, I have every confidence the party room will say that they want Will Hodgman to remain as leader, and then he'll put together his cabinet.
Julie Collins, we'll get your views on Braddon and Lyons in just a moment, but let's take you straight back to Anthony Green with the very latest figures from that monster central seat of Lyons.
And we've got 9.5% counted in Lyons, about 21 polling places. The Liberal Party's on 3.2 quotas. The comparison of booth figure I've got has that a little bit more down towards 50. But that still would return 3 members, have 3 quotas. The Labor Party votes on 1.7. The Green vote is quite low on 0.44. We've got some vote for the Shooters Party and the Jackie Lambie Network. If we look at the leaders there, we can clearly declare Rebecca White elected. There's no doubt that she's going to get a quota in her own right. I suspect the problem for the Labor Party is that there's nobody else on that list there at this stage. You've got to get under Jen Butler to find somewhere. If Jen Butler's number 2, it suggests there's some votes from the East Coast coming at this stage. You've then got 5 Liberals as the next 5 candidates on the total. So Rebecca White will have a surplus, which will flow on. But Mark Shelton, Guy Barnett and Reen Hitting are the elected now. We'll probably give Mark Shelton elected soon, given his vote. But we've declared Rebecca White elected because Labor will clearly have more than a quota. She'll dominate that vote.
Thank you, Anthony. So, Julie Collins, a tough ask for Labor in Lyons.
Well, these are just small regional booths coming in, as Anthony has cautioned, so I wouldn't read too much into that at the moment. But we're obviously pleased Rebecca's polling so well, and I'm not surprised. Just on Braddon, in terms of the Jackie Lambie Network, our scrutinies are showing that around... I'll just get my figure. 18% are going to the Liberals and 44% coming to Labor in Braddon, which is pretty interesting. It's Nick's nodding over there, so his scrutiny is it must be saying the same. So given her vote there at the moment, again, regional birds, so be cautious, but that would be flowing mostly to Labor at this point in time.
Nick McKim, how worried are you that Rebecca White's enormous popularity is going to pull votes away from the Greens, given that's one of the seats that you were looking to pick up?
Yeah, look, that's possible. Look, Beck's a fresh new voice for the Labor Party, and she's taken a strong position, particularly on pokies, and it was always a danger for us that might happen. A little bit early for me to start conceding anything in that area, but we'll just have to wait and see as the night progresses.
Thank you very much, Nick McKim. I think we can now take it back to Anthony Green with the latest results as they're coming in. 5% of the vote counted. Let's focus now on the seat of Denison.
No, it's Ferntree. No, this is Ferntree.
I don't think it'll end up like that at the end of the night.
I don't.
For the people in the mainland, that's probably the greenest booth in the electorate.
Yes.
So I can't do any comparison on that, but that shows that if that was the final result, it was something. People on the mainland probably don't know, but Denison has two ends. There's the northern end, which is the Glenorchy City Council, which is an overwhelmingly working class district, overwhelmingly strong for Labor. The southern end is much more socially mixed, much more middle class, and is very much, there's a big battle between the Greens and the Liberals and Labor with roughly equal votes. Ferntree's, I think it's up clustered at the base of Mount Wellington from memory, and it's obviously a really strong vote for the Greens. It's on the way to the Huon Valley, south of Hobart. So yeah, I don't think we'll put too much weight onto that figure yet.
OK, and let's stay in Denison. Our colleague Peter Carline joins us now from North Hobart with prominent local Labor MP Scott Bacon. Peter.
The Wagon and Horses. It's the establishment of choice for the Labor Party faithful. Lots of love in the room tonight and support and very buoyant feeling. And I'm joined by the Shadow Treasurer, Scott Bacon. He's seeking a third term in office with this election. Scott, thank you very much for joining us. Obviously, we're at the end of the campaign now. It's been pretty hectic. How are you feeling?
Yeah, I'm feeling positive about the result for the Labor Party. Rebecca White's run a very strong campaign, and I think that the Tasmanian people will respond to that.
And do you feel like you yourself have run an effective campaign? What have you been focusing on in the lead up to the poll?
Well, we've run a very grassroots campaign in Denison with 5 strong Labor candidates, and we're hoping to win 3 seats in Denison. We've had candidates working since July of last year right across the electorate, and we're hoping for a positive result.
Now, of course, we did see lots of advertising from the Liberals and quite a strong campaign for them in terms of being very visual. Do you accept that that might have got them over the line?
Well, it's still a long way to go. We do know that the Liberal Party ran a very well-financed campaign, but what the Labor Party has done is get out every day, door knock, talk to people on the telephone about the issues that matter to them, and we're still hopeful there'll be a strong response to that from the Tasmanian people.
And Labor leader Rebecca White, does she have your support?
Absolutely. Rebecca White has run a fantastic campaign. She is a fantastic leader of the Tasmanian Labor Party and will be so for a very long time.
OK, and do you think you've got a lot of support here in the room tonight? How's everyone feeling? Do you think that Labor Party can govern in its own right?
Yeah, we're certainly hopeful that we can govern in our own right. We've run a strong campaign. As I said, a very grassroots campaign against a well-financed opposition, and we'll see what happens.
OK, Scott Bacon, Shadow Treasurer, thanks very much for joining us.
Thanks very much.
And thank you very much, Peter Carline. So over to you, Judy Collins, just picking up on one of the questions Peter Carline asked there. If Labor loses, is Rebecca White safe in the leader's job?
Oh, absolutely. I think even the early results are showing that, Rebecca's leadership and the way she's held the team together and led the team has been extraordinary, and I don't think there's any doubt.
And Erica Betts, your thoughts on Denison? A high-profile potential clash between Sue Hickey and Elise Archer?
That will be a very interesting contest to see who comes out on top. Elise Archer has worked exceptionally hard. That is recognised across the board. If there is the opening of an envelope somewhere in Denison, Elise Archer is there. She is an indefatigable worker, grassroots worker, and of course now has ministerial responsibilities which she has undertaken exceptionally well. So let's wait and see what happens. And there is, and I'm not going to call this, I hope it doesn't happen, but the poker machine issue in Denison was a lot stronger than anywhere else. So it will be interesting to see how that impacts on our vote in Denison, but I'm still hopeful we'll hold 2 seats, and on all indications it'll be Elise Archer and Sue Hickey.
Senator, it's no secret that Elise Archer and Sue Hickey don't get on particularly well. How do they work together if they both get elected?
Well, they've been working together exceptionally well during the campaign, and as is the want in human relationships, from time to time there are issues, but to their great credit they've both buried the issues and they've moved forward to ensure that we get the very best possible result in Denison. And if both of those ladies can get elected tonight, I think it will lock in majority Liberal government for us.
Did they work well together during the campaign, though? They were barely out next to one another at any stage during the campaign.
Or most of the candidates, by the virtue of the Hare-Clark system, individual candidates do their own thing. It's very rare that you get a connection, let's say, like John Tucker and Jane Howlett, Beauty and the Beast, as we called them, during the campaign in Lions. But other than that, usually it's each candidate for themselves, and I don't see any difference between, let's say, Elise Archer, Sue Hickey, and, let's say, Adam Brooks and Joan Ryler.
Right. I'd like to pick up on a point you mentioned there. Senator Abetz touched on the prevalence or how important the issue of pokies was in Denison. How worried are you that again is going to pull votes away from the Greens and towards Labor?
Well, I don't think people will forget that the current deed was actually delivered by the Labor Party. It was the Labor Party that locked that deed in. I was in the State Parliament at the time, 2003. They had no mandate to do it. It was a secret deal stitched up between Jim Bacon, David Crean, who was Treasurer at the time, and Greg Farrell, and presented to the Parliament as a fait accompli. I don't think people are going to forget that. Look, there's no doubt that Labor shifting on pokies was an electoral risk to us, but we are glad that Labor shifted, because we've got to get these parasitic machines out of the Tasmanian community.
OK, Nick McKim, thank you. Let's finish our Around the Grounds run now. Anthony Green, the seat of Franklin.
Let's have a look at the party totals here. The Liberal Party on 2.84 quotas, the Labor Party just over 2, Tasmanian Greens on 0.9. That makes it a very interesting race for the last seat, if those figures continue up. The Liberal vote consistently is a little bit down in that electorate, but on the comparison of polling figures I've got, I think by the end of the night, the Green figure might be down and the Labor figure slightly higher, which would then also be good for the Liberal Party winning that final seat. But we'll get onto it in the summary in a few minutes, but the Greens are not doing very well at the moment on all the electorates of the figures we're seeing. But let's look at the leaders that we're seeing here. Will Hodgman, we've declared elected on 2.2 quotas. He's got more than 2 quotas in his own right. 37% would give him one of the highest votes ever recorded if he ends up with that. Last time when he got 35.3, it was the highest vote anybody's ever got who wasn't a Premier. So it's again, I think there's been 5 members elected with more than a quota in Franklin in the last 20 years, and 5 of them have been called Hodgman. So it's a bit of a family trait. David O'Byrne's strongly positioned there. Rosalie Woodruff will rely on the overall level of the Green vote in that electorate. So at this stage, it's definitely too Liberal. It's looking like potentially too Labor. That last spot, we'll wait to see what happens with that Green and Labor vote and how the Liberal vote tracks for that third seat.
Anthony Green, and staying with Franklin, let's go to the tally room 4. Leon Compton is joined by one of the candidates in that seat. Leon.
One of the things that, of course, is incredibly hard to work out from here is how those Hodgman preferences will flow down the ticket. Nick Street, our guest this evening, is one of the people eagerly wondering that question as well. Nick Street, good evening.
Good evening, Leon. How are you?
At this stage, looking at the board, will you be elected in your own right in Franklin?
Look, I don't think that there's any way that I'm going to reach a quota myself, but I think from what we're looking at the minute, we can see that Will Hodgman's still the most popular politician in the state by a considerable distance, and the rest of us will just have to wait for his preference flow, I'd suggest.
Vanessa Goodwin, for people just coming home and settling down in front of the TV or listening to us on the radio, a well-regarded Liberal member of the Upper House has passed away today. She endorsed your campaign only a month ago. Nick, what can you tell us about that endorsement and Vanessa Goodwin and what she's meant for you?
Look, it was an incredible honour when Vanessa offered to endorse my campaign, and of course I took her up on it. You said she's well regarded. She was actually loved, Leon. She was genuinely loved by people across this whole community in Tasmania. Labor, Green, Liberal, it didn't matter. Everybody loved Vanessa. When she had to resign from Parliament, obviously the Parliament was the lesser for that, and then her passing today, the whole community is the lesser for that as well. All we can do is pass on our condolences to her friends and family. It's devastating for all of us.
It is, as we say, difficult to understand at the border at this stage. You came to Parliament after Paul Harris stepped down 2 years ago now. Do you think, off the back of what you've seen, you will be elected tonight?
I think, from what I can see at the minute, although it's early, I think we'll hold 3 seats in Franklin, which is incredibly exciting for the government and a key to us holding our majority across the state as well.
Thanks for your time.
Thank you.
And there we see a dazzling early evening shot of the Hobart waterfront. Having spent some time here over the last 3 days, I reckon that is one of the best waterfronts in Australia. Sydney Harbour.
In the world.
Yeah, Sydney Harbour, eats your heart out.
It is beautiful.
It is beautiful, and we've got a Unity ticket on that as well. Lots to see there. We are in Hobart live in the tally room, the only tally room left in Australia, so we're very pleased to be here, and we now take you back to Anthony Green with 10% of the vote counted, with all the very latest.
Well, again, these are our figures that we've corrected from where they're from. At the moment, the Liberals are tracking towards just under 50%, Labor 36%, the Greens are on 5%, and I'll get onto that in a moment, Jackie Lambie Network 3.5%. What we're seeing in all the electorates so far is a swing from Green to Labor. Now, again, there's a lot of this from Lions, where the Greens are doing particularly badly on the early figures. But at the moment, that's what we're seeing, is a shift from the Greens to Labor, and not much happening with the Liberal vote. So if there's not much happening with the Liberal vote, then they're not going to lose many seats. So with 10% counted, this is very good early figures for the Green, for the Liberal Party. Now, I will add to that, there's a lot of Denison and Franklin figures to come. But in terms of the other 3 electorates, they're very strong figures for the Liberal Party, and they'd be quite happy with the position that they're seeing at the moment.
OK, Anthony Green, thank you so much. Nick McKim, what do you make of that analysis about the Greens really suffering?
Well, I spoke about the north-south divide right up front in this panel, and Anthony's been very clear we're not seeing many results from Denison and Franklin, so I'm not pushing the panic button quite yet. Look, no surprise in those figures, considering they are mostly from northern Tasmania, but I would say that any drop at all in the Liberal vote in Braddon just rules out 4 seats entirely. I mean, the planets aligned spectacularly for the Liberals in Braddon in the last election. It was unlikely that they were ever going to do that again, even if they held their vote. It looks like they've come off a bit, so you can write off a seat, in my view, for the Liberals in Braddon.
On Franklin, Julie Collins, It looks like the Liberals are polling pretty strongly there. How damaging was it for Labor not to have a sitting MP recontesting?
I don't think it was that damaging for Labor. I mean, we've got some strong candidates, as you've seen from the results there. You know, we've got 3 candidates particularly vying for, the leadership at the moment in terms of the Franklin ticket. So, Kevin Midson, Alison Stannon and David O'Byrne, I think, are excellent candidates, as are the other candidates in Catherine and in Heather. But clearly those 3, Midson and... sorry, I've just forgotten their names again. So sorry, I'm watching Richard's moving hands. So Kevin Midson and David O'Byrne and Alison Stannon, I think, are doing very well tonight. I think it's interesting about the Green vote, though. Look, it'd be interesting to see what the statewide Green vote is at the moment, because the last time that the Green vote in Tasmania was under 10% was 1986. So it's been a long time since the Green vote was that low. So it will be interesting to see when those Denison and Franklin figures come in about where the Greens land tonight.
It will be indeed. We'll come back to you in a moment. Erica Betts, let's now take you back to Anthony Green with all the very latest on the seat of Bass.
I'll just mention one little mathematical peculiarity. At the moment, the Green vote is down 18% in Bass in the booths that have come in. Now, they didn't get double digits last time, and currently we're calculating they've got minus 5%, because that's the swing that's playing. They can't possibly get minus 5%. Even the worst electoral system in the world can't deliver you negative votes. But that's partly why the big swing is there, is that the booths that are in for Lions are very bad for the Greens. They can't do quite as badly as that at the end of the night. So some of that, when I had a close look at the figures, that's what's going on. Now, Bass. What have we got in Bass now? We've got 12% counted. The Liberal vote is still above 3 quotas. That's still higher than I think is tracking down from that figure from here. The Labor Party on 1.56, the Greens 0.52, Jackie Lambie Network 0.3. We'll look at the change in vote that's going on. This isn't corrected, unfortunately. So I think that might not be very meaningful, so I'll move on to the leaders as the next display. Peter Gutwin, we've declared elected Michael Ferguson, Michelle O'Byrne. As I thought, the second Labor candidate has changed. We've started to see some urban booths come in. Sarah Courtenay's still on half a quota, which is a good position for the Liberals. If they've got two, we filled quotas, and two other candidates there, one on 0.2 and one on 0.15, so that's good for them. The problem for the Labor ticket is Michelle O'Byrne's got one quota, and if I go back to the overall figures for the party, there's only 1.5, 1.6 quotas, so the vote's very evenly split across the rest. There's no one else dragging votes into the Labor ticket at this stage, which means that at the end of the count, there's going to be a contest, most likely between the Greens and the Labor Party. And from having done Bass at the last 4 elections, you've got to wait for all the votes to be counted and figure out the order the candidates are on the Labor ticket and what is the overall total of the Greens, because that's been the contest every time at the last few elections between the second and third candidate on the Labor ticket and the lead Green candidate. So we'll be coming back to Bass a lot later.
We will, and let's stay in Bass for the moment. Let's stay in that region. Our colleague Linda Hunt is in Launceston with one of the government's key figures. Linda, good evening to you.
Good evening again. Now, Reen Heading has been a Member of Parliament since 1996. He's a former opposition leader, and for the past 4 years, he has been the Police Minister. Now, Reen, that is a position that gained a lot of interest over the past 48 hours over the policy to change gun laws. Do you think the criticism that's been out on social media, and there's been a lot of discussion on the panel tonight, is it justified?
Oh, frankly, it's a load of nonsense. It's frankly confected outrage by the Greens particularly, a party that had no political oxygen at all, grabbed onto a perfectly normal arrangement under politics where, particularly in detail, you write to stakeholders and say this is what we would intend to take to Parliament, whereby there's a full discussion, full consultation with everybody. That process was a result of 4 years of hard work with stakeholders, which is what a responsible minister and a government does. And that's where we'd arrived. It stayed within the bounds of the National Firearms Agreement, and it met with the broad approval of the stakeholders that we were working with. And we know that when people see how simple it is, what we're talking about, modernising language, that it'll clear the Parliament quite safely.
But not a sneaky manoeuvre, as the criticism has been to not release it to the media?
Nothing sneaky about giving it to stakeholders a month out from the election and encouraging them to put it up on their websites, which they did. And then journalists are finding, what on earth is going on with journalism these days, that they don't read people's, the stakeholders' websites.
Now, you've spoken about stakeholders, but what about community stakeholders? Were they consulted?
Oh, look, this was a highly detailed document on matters of great detail that have been worked on for 4 years, modernising of language, coming into harmony with other states. It really wasn't and shouldn't be and isn't a matter of particularly any contention at all, other than the fact that the Greens confected outrage.
But it isn't just the Greens. There have been community groups who were upset that they weren't consulted in the same way that some of the gun owner groups were.
No, because this is a proposal to take something to Parliament where every single stakeholder in the world would be consulted and have an opportunity to work through. This was a detailed set of technical arrangements, technical changes to deal with changes to modern farming practices. But what we're dealing with here is farmers who want tools of trade to be what they ought to be and what they used to be. And with a change of language where an employee is no longer an employee, they're contractors now, but the language in the legislation doesn't allow that. And so those things need to be changed. Look, this material will go to Parliament. There'll be full scrutiny, and it was completely proper and appropriate to do it the way we did. We encouraged them to put it up on their own websites, which
we'll have to finish there. I'm sorry, Reen Heading. Thank you.
Thank you.
And Linda Hunt, thank you. So Nick McKim, an open and consultative change there put forward according to Reen Heading on the gun laws.
Well, I'd just make the point again, Michael, if you want to claim a mandate for your policies, you put them in front of all the voters can see them, the voters can make up their minds. This was not put before the voters, and in fact very few people knew about it until it blew up on the front page of the Australian yesterday. So the Liberals have been caught out not only trying to water down the National Firearm Agreement in Tasmania, of all places, but they've been caught out trying to do it sneakily. Look, in terms of what impact that'll have on the election, late-breaking stories like this, I think, only impact at the margins, but in Hare Clark, sometimes you only need something to impact at the margins to change the result in that seat and therefore the overall result.
Senator Abetz.
What I think we're seeing here is Nick McKim trying to get a Labor-Green accord going.
that's not
There
true.
is no criticism at all of Rebecca White's letter of only
Well, she's not
one
trying to water
word.
down the National
Oh, well,
Firearm
she
Group.
is.
No,
She
she's
is.
not.
She-
No.
Just on
She
that.
is
No,
indeed.
Just hang on a
If
second,
you are
Julie Collins.
asserting-
We'll let Eric Abetz finish.
If you are asserting that about what the Liberals are proposing, then you have to acknowledge that that is exactly the same. But as predicted, Nick McKim's running the defence for the Labor Party.
Julie Collins, you wanted to buy in that?
Well, I thought what was interesting in Reen Hidding's interview there is that he said it went into great detail. He said that there had been a lot of consultation with the firearms group and there was a lot of detail. Labor only said we were going to consult, which actually puts paid to what Eric was trying to spin earlier about the differences, right? So let's be very clear. And it's also, in my view, from the figures that I'm getting through at the moment, about some significant swings to Labor in Denison. I think it might actually impact in that seat where a lot of people are anti-changes to the gun control laws. So it'd be interesting to see if Anthony's got any new figures in Denison, because I've got a few coming through showing double-digit swings to Labor.
We'll come back to that in a moment. But of course, we have mentioned everybody this afternoon tonight has been shocked by the news of the former Attorney General Vanessa Goodwin's death. She was a much-loved figure, really right across the political spectrum. But we can now bring in Leon Compton on the tally room floor with the former Labor Premier Lara Giddings with a much-needed burst of good news. Leon, over to you.
Natasha.
Well, indeed, Michael, thank you for that, because this is a boost of good news, and indeed we bring you a whole family of the extended Giddings clan tonight. Let's welcome Natasha onto ABC TV for the first time, and of course Kiki, Ollie and Ginger, Lara Giddings and her partner Ian. Lara Giddings, good evening to you.
Good evening, Leon.
Right. Welcome, Natasha. She looks pretty comfortable actually in front of the cameras. How old is Natasha?
She's now 5 weeks old, so she's doing very well. She was a little bit premature, so we're very happy to have a healthy, beautiful baby.
How important was, or how significant was the quest to have a family, Lara, in deciding to step down from politics?
Well, it wasn't a factor in my decision to step down. I had decided really some time ago that this would be my last term in Parliament, but it's a beautiful way for me to say goodbye to politics and hello to motherhood.
You would have been incredibly close to Vanessa Goodwin, and the sad news, of course, that she has passed away. Your reflections on somebody that you would have worked incredibly closely with over the journey.
There are some politicians that really do cross the political divide. They are honoured and welcomed and loved by everybody, and Vanessa Goodwin was one of those people. She was a friend of mine, and I will miss her, as I know many people in the electorate of Franklin will do so. She was much admired for her intelligence, for her dedication, her integrity. She was a fantastic Member of Parliament, and it's very sad to see what's happened to her.
Lara Giddings, and to the family, thanks for your time.
Thanks, Leon.
And lovely Natasha, absolutely gorgeous. Thank you so much, Leon Compton. Let's go back to Anthony Green with figures now tumbling in for the seat of Braddon.
Let me see. In Braddon, we now got just 11% counted. The numbers have gone up. The Liberal Party is still above 3/4, and that's still the figure I'm seeing. Now, there's some quite interesting numbers here, and it's interesting to see on the leaders' ticket. Labor Party's on 1.47, Jackie Lambie Network 0.42, the Ungroup's 0.41. I'll have a look at that in a moment. The Tasmanian Greens 0.22, Shooters 0.19. Let's look at the leading candidates here. Jeremy Rockcliffe and Adam Brooks, we've declared elected. Anita Dow leads the Labor ticket, and Shane Broad on 0.41. They've only got a quota between them, so they're going to rely on other votes to come. Roger Jensch has now pulled ahead of Joan Rala, as I thought might happen when the larger urban areas came in. Craig Garland is still there on 5.9%, so it's not just a little community town. I was expecting that to be Brenton Best. Unless there's something wrong with the count. But currently Craig Garland, I think he's had a lot to do with complaining about fish being taken, the seals taking the fish in the northwest or something. But that's quite a surprising figure at this stage. And then the numbers drop off from there. But at this stage, to look at that party total, the Liberals will lose a seat, and that was expected. But at this stage, Labor's only got one of those seats. I didn't see who was the leader on the Jackie Lambie ticket. The problem with the Jackie Lambie ticket is their candidates are all way down here.
Yep.
And with none of them above 2% of the vote, there'll be a leakage out of their ticket. So they're not going to stay in for the end of the count. So they're not good figures for the Jackie Lambie ticket.
Well, let's go to Braddon. Carla Howe is in the northwest with Labor MP Shane Broad. Carla.
Shane Broad was elected last year after Labor leader Brian Greene resigned. Shane, how do you think you'll poll tonight?
Well, hopefully a bit better than 4 years ago. Yeah, things have changed, definitely. We've seen that when we've been out on the doors, that people are engaged with us, and at the moment we're looking at probably 5 to 8% swings, which is going to be enough, hopefully, for 2 Labor seats in Braddon.
How certain are you that you will pick up 2 seats?
Reasonably certain now. We're starting to see data from the scrutineers coming in from some of the bigger booths, and that shows that it's looking more and more certain that Labor will pick up 2 seats in Braddon.
Well, former Burnie Mayor Anita Dow has quite a high profile. Is that going to hurt you?
Oh, I mean, it's not really about that. It's about getting 2 Labor seats in Braddon. At the moment, it depends on which end of the coast you are. Anita obviously has a very high profile in Burnie because she's done a lot of work there. She's from Burnie. I'm sort of more Ulverston, this sort of end of the coast. So it always depends on which booths are coming in. But it doesn't really matter, I don't think, in the big scheme of things, because it's about getting 2 Labor seats in Braddon at least. But we are seeing some interesting trends. We're seeing the Green vote go down quite considerably. We're seeing Jackie Lambie having a presence, but nothing terribly threatening. So at the moment, it's looking, from the data that I've seen, between a 5 to 8% swing back to Labor, which is always encouraging, and the Jackie Lambie no threat. But at the moment, it's looking to be 3-2 in Braddon.
Shane Broad, thanks for your time.
Thank you very much.
Julie Collins, does Shane Broad's assessment marry with what you're hearing on the ground there? 2 seats?
It certainly does.
For Labor.
Particularly with the Jackie Lambie candidates so spread down the bottom like that, it is looking towards 2 seats for Labor, and that's obviously a gain of a seat for us, so I'll be pretty happy. They've been working really hard on the ground up there, particularly with a lot of door knocking and a lot of calling, so that's obviously showing that it's paying off.
And Richard Baines, Jackie Lambie network really appearing to flame out pretty early in the night. I guess no great surprise, given the polls throughout the campaign have suggested Jackie Lambie's party was always having trouble gaining traction.
That's exactly right. I think early in the piece we had them on about 7%, but in that final poll, I think they were down to about 4%, and on those numbers they were not looking likely at all to get in, with, again, Braddon being their best hope.
Erica Betts, what's the latest you have on the ground there?
Oh, look, I think 3-2 is a very likely scenario, but you never say never with a Hare-Clark system. But one thing I think we can say is the Jackie Lambie network has flamed out, and if it's flamed out in Braddon, which is the home territory for Jackie, then I would imagine her return to the Senate, which requires a statewide vote, will be exceptionally difficult in 18 months' time. I think it's over and out.
It will also be interesting, obviously, to see when those Burnie booths come in, because that's obviously where Jackie's been based, to see what her vote is actually like in those booths. But at this stage, I think Labor's on the ground campaign in Burnie and in Braddon more particularly is starting to pay off. We obviously could not compete with the Liberals and their advertising, but we did do a lot of calls and a lot of door knocking in Braddon. Let's
look at 19% of the vote counted with all the very latest. Anthony Green on the seat of Franklin.
Yeah, in Franklin, the Liberal Party's got nearly a quarter of the vote, 2.8 for the Liberal Party, just over 2 for the Labor Party, and just under a quota for the Greens. On those numbers, we're looking at 2-2 and a battle between the Liberal Party and the Greens for the final seat. There's only one other candidate on the ballot paper, the Shooters Party, with 2.9% of the vote. That's only a single candidate. So all of those votes will have preferences for someone else on the ballot paper. And I would take a guess that there's a strong flow towards the Liberal Party. So we want to see all the votes counted in Franklin, and that'll be, that last seat will be very interesting to watch, and we'll want to see all the votes counting. I just want to say one thing. I seem to, there's something calculating wrong in my figures for Lions. I'm certain there's something wrong. The computer we're using to drive the graphics is saying there's an 18% swing against the Greens, and my other system, which I wrote myself, is only showing an 8% swing, and I'm inclined to believe the system that I wrote myself, which is an 8% swing. So I might have to turn off this calculation, which is comparing polling place by polling places, because somewhere in there it's mixing up the Labor and Green vote in Lions, and that's projecting through to the overall election figures. So in other words, soon I might be just using the raw numbers, but we've got a reasonable counting at this stage. so you can actually do that. But there's something wrong with my figures for Lions at the moment. I'm going to have to try and find out what it is.
Dare I say it's been crossed lines.
Something's wrong.
Election night computer. Hey, let's stick with Franklin for the time being. Nick McKim, Rosalie Woodruff.
Look, I think Rose, if she polls 0.95% of a quota, or if the Greens poll 0.95 and that continues through, I reckon that's a relatively certain hold for us. I've got some interesting boos come through, and Eric, both you and I are interested in Blackman's Bay. Fun fact for everyone, Eric and I both went to Blackman's Bay Primary School, and
it's also the biggest booth in Franklin.
It is a big booth, and as I said, I grew up there, but we're getting greater than 5% of Will Hodgman's primary is leaving the Liberal ticket straight away. 2% coming to us and 3% going to Labor is my figures. Okay. So Hodgman's vote, Will's vote, will leak to a reasonably significant degree.
The same year in that primary school?
No, I think Eric might have been a couple of years ahead, Eric. I don't want to cast
Although your viewers would not be able to detect that from looking at us, I think Nick might be right.
OK, let's continue to look at the figures coming in, and we can now, I think, take you back to Anthony Green with the latest from the central seat of Denison.
Let's have a look at Denison. We got 15% of the vote counted. Wow. The Labor Party on 2.5, the Liberals on 2.3, and the Greens on 1%. That looks like 2-2-1, which is the status quo. With only 14.7% counted, as I was explaining earlier, this is quite a diverse electorate. I can't tell you whether that includes an overrepresentation of Glenorchy or Hobart City Council. So you'll just have to wait for a deeper analysis of that. But if you look at the leaders on those votes, what you're seeing is Elise Archer has got a quota, Scott Bacon has got a quota, Cassie O'Connor has got 0.76, and with the Greens on a quota, she would go on to get elected. Sue Hickey, as expected, is the second Liberal candidate, and then the Labor candidates are split between Ella Haddad on 0.51, Madeleine Ogilvie 0.42, Tim Cox 0.37. Let me see, Scott Bacon was on 1. Those are only adding to about 1.2 between them. The chances that they could amalgamate and get ahead of Sue Hickey, I think, is difficult. And that was the only prospect for Labor getting 3, was that they could get ahead of Sue Hickey as the second Liberal candidate, with 2 Labor candidates passing. And I don't think on those figures we're going to see that. Christy Johnston, who was the least known of the Liberal candidates, this might tell me that they're from Glenorchy, because that's the same name as the mayor of Glenorchy, who is not the Liberal candidate here. So there might be some, like the old Jim Bacon, Ken Bacon confusion a number of years ago. There might be a bit of name confusion there. But I mean, she wasn't the candidate was best known in the electorate, I would have thought. OK, and speaking of Sue Hickey, the Hobart Lord Mayor, the star Liberal Party candidate in the seat of Denison, joins our colleague Leon Compton now on the tally room floor. Leon.
And as Anthony mentioned, she's running a strong second in the seat of Denison. She's with me now. Sue Hickey, come Monday, will you be the Mayor of Hobart or the member for Denison, based on what you can see on the boards at the moment?
I think it's still very much up to the electors of Denison, so I'm not really certain what the answer to that is. It looks like I will be elected.
You will be elected. A lot of people talking about the fact that in the last 24 hours, signs, your signs, other Liberal signs, were defaced with the word guns written across them. How significant was the leaking of the Liberal Party's firearms policy to the vote in Denison? Do you think you suffered a late swing?
I think it certainly had an effect in Denison. I think the people of Braddon and Bass are probably much happier with the outcome of that decision, that leak, than I was. But, I mean, it's not policy, it's suggestion, and it still has to go on the floor and be challenged by the whole Parliament.
And challenged by you. How do you feel about the guns proposals that were put forward by Reen Heading?
Well, I'm not really certain. I'm a person who likes to do all the research and get all the facts, so I'd be speaking to farmers and sporting shooters as well as the general public. I think it's really critical to find out what the detail is, and to be honest, I've been so busy I haven't actually been able to research all of that, but it did come as a bit of a shock.
Sue Hickey, you don't have the aura of a humble, ordinary backbencher about you. If you are elected tonight, what ministerial portfolio would you like to hold if Will Hodgman has returned?
Oh, it's definitely up to the Premier to make that decision. But, you know, if you had the pick of them, I suppose state growth, local government would certainly be interesting, small business, things like that. But there's no guarantee for any person standing. Obviously, the higher you vote, the better your chances are.
It's been interesting. We've seen a range of different approaches to people who have been elected from mayor's positions, some even in the case of Steve Martin in the Senate, just choosing to stay in both roles concurrently. If you're elected tonight, will you stand down from the mayor's job? Will there be a by-election?
That has been my intention, yes. There won't be a by-election because I wouldn't leave before the 7th of March, which will save the electors of Denison $150,000 by-election. So that was always the reason why I sort of stayed in the zone but stepped down on leave. And what will happen then is the acting Lord Mayor, Alderman Ron Christie, will step up as Mayor, and that saves the electors, as I say, going back to an election for such a short period, just till October.
Sue Hickey, you have a famous rivalry with Elise Archer. She's ahead of you in the polls at the moment. How will you work together if you are both representing Denison?
Well, I hope, Leon, that you've said that I'm a very reasonable person and I don't have too many spats, so I would...
But you have had a significant spat with her in the past.
Well, that's in 2009, and Elise did apologise, and I'm moved on, and I think she has too. I mean, we've got to work together. We're both very professional, we're both hard-working, and we've both got interests that we want to pursue. So, I mean, that's just ridiculous.
You've had the top job in Hobart. Would you like to be Premier one day?
I've got to get through tonight first. Look, the top job as Lord Mayor was fantastic, and I'm very, very grateful to the people of Hobart. I've learnt an awful lot about myself being Mayor. So many strengths that I didn't realise I had. It's a huge job. But, you know, I was hoping that probably I can use these strengths to go on and do something else for a greater, the greater part of Tasmania.
Thanks for your time.
You're welcome.
Ready to concede we can't get...
Leon Compton there with Richard, a very confident Hobart Lord Mayor there.
Yeah, and Senator Abetz, we'll bring you in here. Just on the proposed changes to gun laws, Sue Hickey just said it wasn't policy, it was a suggestion, and that she was shocked by it. Is it Liberal policy or is it a suggestion? And why are candidates shocked?
Well, look, in the seat of Denison, it'd be fair to say that candidates may not necessarily have fully appraised themselves of all the agricultural type policies. So why Sue Hickey said what she did, that I don't know. But what she did say, which is very important, that she would seek to brief herself on all the detail, including talking to the farmers, something which, of course, Rebecca White herself, in her letter, has confirmed that she would.
So, to clarify, it is Liberal policy, it's not a suggestion?
As I understand it, it is policy, but as with all policies, these things have to go through the Parliament, the upper house, and even when you have a policy and governments of all persuasions, when you come out with a policy, you then have to draft legislation and you then make fine-tuning to it. But look, at the end of the day, the National Firearms Agreement is sacrosanct and it will not be undermined. The Premier has said that on a number of occasions, and that remains our very firm position. This is about a little tweak, and there's I can't blame the Greens for trying to get overexcited about it, and same with Labor, but in fairness, when you see Rebecca White's letter, you realise that this is all about tweaking and assisting our farmers.
But a policy kept from public view, though.
Well, even from some of the candidates, obviously.
No.
Sue just said she was surprised she didn't know about it.
Well, just as much as Labor people were not shown Rebecca White's letter of the 27th of February.
We don't have a policy. We said we're going to consult, Erin. You've said you've got a policy.
This is a policy.
You've said you've got a policy, and one of your candidates just said that they weren't aware of it.
It was pretty embarrassing,
It
Eric
was.
It was only because of the way the media sought to portray it without talking about Rebecca White's letter, which starts off, Labor recognises the legitimate use of rearms, I think she meant firearms, for competitive shooting, hunting and as an important tool of trade. And then goes on to say that she would make...
Sue hadn't
that
seen
she
it.
would
So
consult
even one of their own candidates didn't know it was their policy.
Well, it's the media's one thing, Erica Betts, but we heard our national audience, radio and TV, heard one of your candidates say with her own mouth that she wasn't aware of this policy.
Oh, because as a member or candidate for Denison, one does not move, in general terms, within the TFGA, that's the Tasmanian Farmers and Graziers Association, and shooters. They are more in lines, and those organisations had this letter up on their website for weeks before the election.
Well, respectfully, Senator, why is this about talking to the TFGA? Shouldn't Liberals be communicating with other Liberals about policy?
Absolutely.
Because this was a policy initiative, as I understand it, like Rebecca White notes, addressing the legitimate concerns. So farmers have come to the political parties asking them to recognise these legitimate concerns. Rebecca White has, Will Hodgman has, and to try to sort of take to this with an egg beater and whip it up is it's a good try.
We'll come back to that,
end of the day,
but we need to get back to the results as they're coming in. I think Anthony Green is still working out the Lions issues, but you've been in touch, both Julie Collins and Nick McKim, and possibly you, Erica Betts, from your people on the ground there. What are they telling you? Firstly, Julie Collins, about
in
Lions.
there is, according to our scrutiny, is a swing against the Greens of 7 to 8%. So that's not a good result for the Greens, particularly given Nick was saying earlier that he was hoping for a swing to the Greens and picking up a seat. I would have thought that the Greens would be pretty unhappy with that.
Nick McKim, what are you hearing?
There is a swing against us. We're not getting it at that level. We're getting it around 4% swing against us, but that's only on 2 or 3 booths. So, look, Lions is a disparate electorate. People often vote on local issues in Lions, so not writing that one off yet.
On that point, on local issues, why then is one of your candidates, he was a Melbourne councillor, wasn't he, if it's so much about local issues?
Well, Fraser Brindley's lived in Lions for over 5 years, Richard. Now, look, many of us come to Tasmania. I came to Tasmania when I was 5 years old, so I've been here on and off, but mostly on for nearly 50 years, and there are people who still don't think I'm a local in Tasmania. So Fraser's lived in the electorate for 5 years. He's absolutely a local candidate, and any suggestion that he's been parachuted in is just false.
OK, we can now take you to Anthony Green with the latest, at least his computer is telling him on Lions.
Well, let's have a look at Lions, and I'll have to explain here. I'm about to change the way we're calculating. I was talking about there's some sort of error in Lions. Now, I want to make it clear this is not an error in anything which is coming from the Electoral Commission. The error is entirely, and I can't dig around and solve it right now, something to do with the historical vote. Now, there's quite a number of green booths on the East Coast which have polled quite well, and I seem to have got something wrong in the historical figures and it's calculating a false swing. So I'm going to have to turn off our computer to stop doing that comparison. Now, so on these are just the raw numbers, so I haven't got this strange calculation going in the background. The Liberal Party's on 3 quotas, the Labor Party just under 2, Greens on 0.4, Jackie Lambie Network on 0.3, the Shooters on 0.3. Now, that's a relatively big sample. I don't know exactly where all that information is from in terms of the polling booth. But let's look at the leading candidates that we're seeing here. Rebecca White, we've declared elected. Mark Shelton, we've declared elected. And on those figures, you're looking at Guy Barnett and Reen Hittinger both strongly towards being elected, with Jane Howlett holding a strong 4th on the Liberal ticket. Fraser Brindley's down there on 0.18. And the other Green candidates are down here. On these numbers, he hasn't polled well. Again, he's from Evandale, which is north of the electorate. So he may not do as well on the East Coast, may not do well in the Southern Midlands. So you just have to wait in Lions and look at all those numbers. Michael Kent has got 2.9%. Again, you need to know where those figures come from. He's only a mayor in part of that electorate. But it is quite unusual. There's usually there's only been 4 members get a full quota in Lions since the 5-member system was adopted, which is fewer than any other electorate because of this diversity of the electorate. So at the moment, it's looking like 3 Liberal, 1 Labor definite, and I'd say leaning towards a second Labor again. But at the moment, it's a bit hard to find which of the second Labor candidates.
OK, Anthony Green, thank you so much. Now, as you can see on our TV coverage and undoubtedly here on our radio coverage, the tally room floor is fast filling up behind me. It's clearly the place to be in Hobart tonight, and deep there among the crowd is our colleague Leon Compton with one of the Labor candidates for the seat of Franklin. Leon.
Indeed, we caught up with Lara Giddings just a little earlier this evening, and since she announced that she was standing down, the candidate that she very much wanted to succeed her in the seat is Alison Standen. Alison Standen, good evening to you. Based on what you can see tonight, will you get up?
Well, it's very hard to tell, isn't it? As a first-time candidate, all I can say, Leon, is that I have been working so hard for 12 months. I have no regrets. I've put in I think a strong campaign, a grassroots campaign with some very dedicated volunteers. My family have put everything behind this, and I'm just so proud to have done Lara proud, really, to have just worked hard, and we'll see how we go.
How important was the backing of the former Premier in your run for the seat?
Oh, look, significant for me. I've known Lara for a long time and I've admired her as a person of honesty, integrity, hard work. I think as a Premier and Treasurer, she was an extraordinary leader for the state. And when she approached me well over 12 months ago to see if I would consider standing as a candidate, I thought, wow, this is an opportunity for me. I've been a contributor, I suppose, in community service and in health across the state for a long time.
But based on what you can see there and what you're being told from your scrutineers, there's plenty of Labor people who are familiar with these things around the room tonight. Do you think you'll get up?
It's looking more positive than I expected tonight. I really felt that there would be no indication at all for me personally, and I came to the tally room tonight thinking that we'd be just looking at an overall result.
Alison Standen, good to talk to you. Thanks for coming down.
Thanks so much.